Why does cryptography needs math? Imagine a reality where anyone could read your private messages, peek at your finances, or manipulate government secrets with no hassle. Chaos would reign, and trust in digital communication would crumble overnight. Thankfully, we have cryptography, an invisible shield that protects our digital world. Yet at its very core lies something vital: mathematics. Without math, encryption would be merely a fragile illusion, doomed to collapse under scrutiny. Cryptography isn't just about garbling messages. It harnesses mathematical principles to ensure only the rightful recipient can interpret them. Every password, online payment, and private chat depends on intricate numeric operations that push eavesdroppers to the sidelines. Why does math excel in this role? The key lies in its inherent order, complexity, and predictability, essential properties that make encryption both impenetrable and widely usable throughout modern life. At the heart of cryptography lie massive numbers. In particular, it relies on prime factors, modular arithmetic, and logarithms to keep data safe. The magic occurs because some mathematical tasks are simple to perform one way, but nearly impossible to reverse. Think about mixing two paint colors. It's easy to blend them, yet virtually impossible to separate them. Cryptography exploits this exact quirk of mathematics to shield our information. One prominent example is RSA, a widely adopted encryption scheme, relying on the notion that while multiplying two substantial prime numbers is straightforward, uncovering those same primes from their product is extraordinarily tough. This clever method, known as factorization, underpins the security of everything from online banking to private email. Another crucial function of math and cryptography lies in generating patterns too intricate for our minds to detect. We're drawn to patterns, faces in clouds, creatures in stars, and melodies in notes. Yet when encryption is executed properly, any discernible structure dissolves into a chaotic array of random digits that defy casual scrutiny. Imagine an encrypted text as a puzzle without any clear edges, no obvious starting point. The sole way to reassemble it is by using the precise key, carefully generated by selected mathematical functions. Absent that key, even the planet's fastest supercomputer would likely need centuries to crack a well-encrypted transmission. Such immense computational demand highlights how vital mathematics is in constructing codes that resist brute force attempts. An essential element of cryptography is modular arithmetic, a math field involving numbers that loop around like a clock. If you add 15 hours to 10 a.m., you don't arrive at 25 a.m. You hit 1 p.m. instead. This cyclical quality anchors numerous encryption mechanisms, providing both complexity and consistency. This approach works because modular arithmetic makes numbers appear random to anyone lacking the correct formula for decryption. It also paves the way for public key cryptography, allowing two parties to communicate safely without exchanging a hidden key. Absent this clever mechanism, secure chats and online purchases simply couldn't exist today. All encryption systems engage in a perpetual contest against time. Hackers and state agencies persistently search for cracks in mathematical defenses, while cryptographers devise ever more robust solutions. Encryption remains viable because math can generate puzzles so convoluted that brute force assaults, where machines test every feasible key, turn into a practical impossibility for intruders. For instance, with a 256-bit key, even if a machine tested a billion keys each second, it would surpass the universe's entire lifespan to exhaust every option. This astonishing fact illustrates the sheer might of carefully applied mathematics in safeguarding our communications and data. Yet a substantial menace hovers on the horizon: quantum computers. In contrast to classical machines that falter at complex math tasks, quantum systems might someday dismantle current encryption effortlessly. Researchers are proactively developing novel measures, such as lattice-based methods and quantum-proof algorithms, to counter this impending challenge with urgency. Throughout cryptographic history, mathematics has fueled an arms race, advancing as attackers and defenders push each other's limits. One fact endures: as long as people require secure ways to exchange information, math will remain the backbone of encryption. Cryptography goes beyond secrecy. It embodies trust, safeguarding, and the unseen capacity of numbers. Whether you're signing into your inbox or transferring a file, remember, mathematics stands behind the shield that keeps your secret secure. The ancient origins of cryptography. Centuries before digital networks, credit cards, or specialized intelligence services, people recognized the importance of preserving secrets. The practice of encoding messages, now known as cryptography, can be traced back thousands of years. Whether in a Roman emperor's palace or amid the clandestine operations of a wartime spy ring, the drive to communicate securely has left its imprint on pivotal moments in history, even if most of us rarely notice it. Early attempts at hiding meaning appear in ancient Egypt, where scribes used obscure symbols in critical writings. Yet the intentional transformation of text into an unreadable form truly blossomed once powerful civilizations emerged and realized they had vital information to protect. In ancient Greece, the Spartans employed a basic method called the Seidel cipher. A strip of parchment was wound around a wooden rod of a set thickness, and messages were written lengthwise. Unwrapped, the message looked scrambled. Only someone with a rod of the exact diameter could realign the letters to their proper order. During the Roman era, Julius Caesar understood the military value of secrecy. He utilized what we now label the Caesar cipher, shifting each letter of the alphabet by a certain number. With a shift of 3, hello would turn into core. Though simplistic by modern standards, this proved effective when literacy was not widespread. Once discovered, adversaries only had to try every shift to decode it. Yet it sparked a new wave of creative approaches in the pursuit of secrecy. By the Renaissance, cryptography had matured considerably. In 1553, Giovan Battista Bellasso introduced an approach later mistakenly credited to Blaise de Vigenère. Known as the Vigenère cipher, it employed multiple shifting alphabets guided by a keyword, making frequency analysis, the usual method of code breaking, far less useful. A word like king would dictate different substitutions throughout a message, rendering patterns all but invisible to would-be decryptors. For centuries, this system was deemed nearly impossible to break, a testament to its sophisticated design. As the Industrial Revolution reshaped societies, cryptography followed suit. Traditional pen and paper ciphers no longer sufficed in an increasingly complex world. One notable leap came from Thomas Jefferson, who devised a wheel-based contraption in the 1790s known as the Jefferson disk. Stacking several rotating disks imprinted with letters in random orders, users could generate a robust mechanical cipher. Although it didn't see widespread deployment in his era, the same core principles resurfaced in later conflicts, reflecting a gradual shift toward more mechanical methods of encryption. Among the most renowned cryptographic tools in history was the Enigma machine, wielded by Nazi Germany in World War II. It went far beyond simple substitution, incorporating multiple rotors that recalibrated the code at every keystroke. Even if an enemy intercepted an encrypted message, each letter's setting changed with every press, making decryption impossibly complex without knowing the initial setup. Ultimately, Enigma's downfall arose from a blend of inventive code breaking and lapses in operational security. Polish experts first penetrated earlier versions in the 1930s, paving the way for Alan Turing and his colleagues at Bletchley Park to decipher the more advanced wartime variants. Their achievements not only trimmed the length of the conflict, but also saved countless lives. Throughout the ages, cryptography has revolved around a straightforward tenet: certain information must remain hidden. From the cryptic etchings of the ancient world to the mechanical marvels of modern warfare, each generation developed unique ways to safeguard crucial knowledge. Today's encryption mechanisms rely heavily on complex algorithms and computational power, yet they're built on the same guiding principle that once aided Caesar, turning coherent messages into baffling gibberish readable only by those who hold the key. In our current era, encryption stands as a cornerstone of security, protecting everything from private conversations to global defense strategies. Still, if the past offers any lesson, it's that every innovation eventually faces a challenge from evolving technologies and clever new tactics. After thousands of years of secrecy and codecraft, the ongoing question is which emerging breakthrough will define the next chapter in keeping critical information under lock and key. What makes a good encryption system? Encryption can be seen as a high-stakes contest. On one side are people, companies, and governments striving to protect data. On the other side lurk hackers, spies, and even cutting-edge machines determined to penetrate defenses. A truly robust system must be resilient enough to thwart intrusions, yet practical enough for everyday use. Achieving this balance depends on combining sufficient complexity with genuine efficiency. Two factors that define the quality of any encryption strategy. At the heart of every reliable system lies advanced mathematics. Strong ciphers are built around operations that are dramatically simpler to run one way than to reverse. A prime example involves lengthy keys. If an encryption method employs a 256-bit key, there are 2 to the power of 256 possible combinations, a number so vast that no machine today, testing billions of keys per second, could explore every option in anything close to a humanly relevant time frame. Mathematical soundness underpins methods such as RSA, which relies on prime factorization, meaning it's easy to multiply two large prime numbers but extraordinarily difficult to extract them once combined. This disparity forms a wall that intruders struggle to breach. A solid framework must also anticipate known vulnerabilities, like side-channel attacks that exploit physical clues from devices, or man-in-the-middle attacks where data is intercepted mid-transmission. With the looming rise of quantum computers, which could topple certain cryptographic barriers, new techniques are being devised to remain impervious to those future threats. In the rapidly shifting world of cybersecurity, the quest for resilience is never-ending. Yet maximal security alone is not enough. Encryption has to be efficient or people simply won't use it. If encrypting a single message took minutes or demanded enormous computing resources, daily interactions, everything from banking transactions to personal chats would grind to a halt. Fast algorithms such as the Advanced Encryption Standard, AES, demonstrate how robust measures can be paired with agile performance. AES 256, for instance, offers top-tier protection but still runs efficiently on modern devices, including smartphones and small-scale embedded systems. Memory and processing overhead also matter. For devices in the Internet of Things or compact wearables, heavy encryption can quickly become unworkable. A judicious balance ensures users can secure their data without crippling their gadgets. Equally crucial is ease of implementation. Many security lapses don't stem from weak math, but from flawed coding practices or sloppy key management. Even an impeccable cipher can fail if developers implement it incorrectly, or if keys are stored in insecure locations where attackers can grab them outright. The art and science of encryption lie in merging formidable protection with smooth usability. Some schemes prioritize absolute hardness at the expense of speed, while others chase speed and sacrifice resilience. A well-designed system locates a middle ground. It's robust enough to ward off realistic threats, yet runs fluidly enough to handle a flood of daily operations. Secure messaging apps, like those using elliptic curve techniques, illustrate the need to communicate both instantly and securely, letting users chat without long delays or unwieldy setups. Looking ahead, cryptography must continually adapt. Quantum computers promise to shatter the assumptions behind many current methods, so researchers are forging tools like lattice-based encryption that will endure even if quantum technology takes a dramatic leap. This defensive-offensive cycle has always driven cryptographic progress, and the cycle won't slow down anytime soon. In the end, good encryption keeps data safe while preserving convenience. It's like a lock that's tough enough to discourage any attempt at forced entry, but simple enough for the owner to open smoothly. Balancing complexity against efficiency has shaped cryptography from the start, and it remains the guiding principle as we confront the next wave of technological upheavals. Modular arithmetic. Imagine a clock with 12 hours. No matter how high you count, your final answer always cycles back to a number between 1 and 12. If it happens to be 9 o'clock and you add 5 hours, you don't reach 14 o'clock. You arrive at 2. This concept of wrapping around after hitting a certain limit is the basis of modular arithmetic, a seemingly simple idea that underpins a remarkable amount of modern cryptography. At first glance, modular arithmetic might sound like a neat math trick, but in practice it enables many of the secure transactions we rely on every day. It offers a predictable system of operations for those in the know, while presenting a virtually insurmountable puzzle for outsiders. A pivotal advantage is that it creates scenarios where going forward is straightforward, but trying to reverse the same process is prohibitively difficult. Multiplying large numbers is easy. Factoring them when they've been combined under modular constraints is much trickier, especially when immense values are involved. This property has transformed the field of encryption, which requires a way to hide information from unauthorized viewers, but still allow those with the right key to recover it. Long ago, simple substitution ciphers might have worked for small groups, yet they quickly fell to pattern analysis. As communications technology advanced, cryptographers needed more robust methods. Modular arithmetic delivered exactly that, allowing messages to become a scrambled tangle of numbers that only the intended recipient could unscramble. Whether you're shopping online or chatting through an encrypted messaging service, modular arithmetic is silently safeguarding your data. When credit card details are submitted, they're turned into a complex numeric sequence that would be nearly impossible to revert without a special key. Similarly, when two strangers on different continents want to communicate securely, modular arithmetic allows them to exchange key information in a way that doesn't reveal the entire key itself. It's a clever feat. They can each contribute partial data, and through the mathematics of modular operations, both arrive at the same secret key without exposing it in full to any eavesdropper. One reason this approach endures is the staggering number of possibilities it offers. If an attacker tries to break the encryption by brute force, they must contend with monumental calculations that can't be done quickly, even with specialized hardware. Many algorithms built on modular arithmetic produce results so large and intricate that they appear random, thwarting attempts to spot any giveaway pattern. It's a fortress built on the idea that certain arithmetic tasks become prohibitively time-consuming when numbers reach extreme sizes. Yet cryptography must continually evolve. Quantum computing looms as a new challenge, since these cutting-edge machines could one day unravel certain mathematical problems much faster than conventional processors. Researchers are actively preparing new safeguards, many of which still rely on principles derived from modular arithmetic, but combine them with additional structures resilient to quantum-based attacks. Over time, cryptographic methods will likely grow in complexity, but the clock-like nature of modular arithmetic, numbers looping in a predictable yet hard-to-reverse way, remains a core defense. Most people never realize that every secure login, private message, or online purchase benefits from numbers cycling, just like the hours on a clock. This unassuming discipline of mathematics forms a shield that guards countless secrets. From day-to-day transactions to the secure exchange of confidential data, modular arithmetic carries on in the background, quietly keeping the digital world a safer place. Prime numbers and their importance. In modern cryptography, prime numbers serve as more than intriguing numerical oddities. They're the keystones of digital defense. Whether safeguarding email logins, online shopping, or military secrets, primes fuel the math that encrypts our data. Despite looking like basic building blocks, their unique properties make them extraordinarily powerful in securing communications. A prime is any integer greater than 1, with no divisors aside from 1 and itself. Examples like 2, 3, 5, and 7 are familiar, but the bigger primes get, the rarer and less predictable they become. There's no universal formula that effortlessly churns out large primes. This inherent randomness is a huge advantage for cryptography, which depends on operations that are trivial in one direction, like multiplying two massive primes, yet exceptionally hard to reverse, such as factoring that product back into its original primes. One prominent example is RSA encryption. It's straightforward to multiply two large primes, but extraordinarily tough to work backwards and uncover those primes from their product. Suppose a pair of smaller primes, like 17 and 23, yield 391. Factoring 391 is manageable with elementary math, but replace 17 and 23 with two prime hundreds of digits long, and you have a task that's astronomically time-consuming for current technology. This gap in difficulty creates a strong shield for everything from financial transactions to email authentication. Primes also power secure methods like Diffie-Hellman key exchanges. Two individuals can generate a shared secret key across an insecure network by harnessing a large prime base and performing calculations that intertwine private and public values. Even if an eavesdropper observes part of the process without the prime-based computation's specifics, reconstructing the key is infeasible. Popular messaging apps such as Signal and WhatsApp rely on this principle to safeguard user conversations. Why are primes so indispensable? Their unpredictable distribution fosters a one-way complexity. Locking data, multiplying primes, is simple, but unlocking it, factoring, can be practically insurmountable, requiring more time than any attacker could feasibly allocate. This keeps encrypted information beyond the reach of brute force attacks, ensuring sensitive data remains private. However, quantum computing casts a long shadow over prime-based encryption. Quantum machines could, in theory, tackle factorization tasks exponentially faster than standard computers, threatening RSA and similar schemes. Researchers are preparing alternate techniques, but for now, primes remain the cornerstone of cryptography. Their importance extends beyond just encryption. They're vital in digital signatures, random number generators, and blockchain systems that secure cryptocurrencies. Regardless of future breakthroughs, prime numbers will stay central to security. They're unpredictable, hard to factor at large scales, and satisfy cryptographic demands that continue to shape the digital landscape. From everyday tasks like logging into online accounts to highly confidential transmissions, primes act as silent sentinels. Though they may appear unassuming in a textbook, their inherent qualities make them fundamental defenders of our modern interconnected world. Greatest common divisors, GCD, and Euclidean algorithm. Numbers often reveal surprising connections, and one of the most fundamental is the concept of a greatest common divisor, or GCD. This value represents the largest integer that divides two numbers without leaving a remainder. At first glance, it might look like a straightforward arithmetic tool. If you consider 12 and 18, their GCD is 6, since 6 is the biggest integer that fits evenly into both. Likewise, 35 and 50 share 5 as their greatest divisor. Although this may seem like a small-scale trick, it underpins a significant portion of modern cryptography by helping ensure that digital communications remain secure against unauthorized access. Much of encryption depends on ensuring certain pairs of numbers lack any substantial common factors. If two large values share a divisor larger than 1, adversaries might exploit this overlap to uncover encryption keys, thus compromising the secrecy of the system. In RSA, for example, One crucial step involves choosing two large primes that do not share any factors with particular other values used in the key generation process. If an attacker discovered the components of your encryption keys had a non-trivial divisor, they could reverse engineer your secret messages. By confirming that numbers involved in cryptographic operations have a GCD of 1, users ensure that the system remains difficult to breach. However, verifying the GCD for large integers, sometimes hundreds or thousands of digits long, would be impractical without an efficient method. Enter the Euclidean algorithm, a centuries-old procedure named after the ancient Greek mathematician Euclid. Its beauty lies in its simplicity. Instead of testing every possible divisor, it systematically replaces large numbers with their remainders from division steps. First, you divide the larger by the smaller and note the remainder. Then you take the smaller number and divide it by that remainder. You keep repeating this process until the remainder reaches 0. The last non-zero value you get is the GCD. This might sound tedious, but it is astonishingly quick even for huge values, precisely the kind of agility cryptographic systems demand. Speed is vital in encryption because secure transactions usually need to happen in the blink of an eye. From online banking to private chats, nobody wants to wait around for mathematics to complete. That's why so many algorithms that rely on GCD calculations incorporate the Euclidean algorithm behind the scenes. It enables rapid checks of numerical relationships, allowing systems to confirm whether numbers are relatively prime, sharing no divisor greater than 1, or if a hidden factor could undermine security. The same principle even contributes to determining modular inverses, an important operation for unlocking encrypted data within a variety of cryptographic frameworks. Part of what makes the Euclidean algorithm so valuable is the insight it provides into how numbers fit together, almost like interlocking puzzle pieces. Repeatedly performing division and tracking remainders might sound mechanical, yet it exposes deeper patterns that apply far beyond basic arithmetic. These repeating steps offer a glimpse into the inherent structure, lurking in seemingly random digits. The same algorithmic thinking has found applications in areas such as computer science and even music, where rhythmic cycles can be dissected using a similar approach. In the realm of encryption, however, these patterns are most crucial for crafting robust keys. When two parties communicate securely, they rely on keys formed from specific arithmetic properties that outsiders can't easily replicate or break. If someone attempting to intercept your message can't find a common divisor, other than 1, between the numbers that generate your key, they'll be stuck with an intractable problem. This difficulty is the essence of cryptographic strength. It's easy to perform the needed operations if you have the key, yet fiendishly hard to reverse without it. Looking ahead, the continued evolution of cryptography may bring fresh challenges. Quantum computers, for instance, hold the promise, or threat, of performing factorization much faster than today's machines, which could jeopardize many existing encryption schemes. However, the idea of choosing numbers that are incompatible in a mathematical sense, that share no significant factor, will likely remain a guiding principle in new encryption designs. Even if tomorrow's ciphers change shape, the importance of prime factors and the efficiency offered by the Euclidean algorithm will persist in some form, simply because the logic is so elemental and effective. Given how critical swift calculations are and how fundamental the GCD is in forging trustworthy encryption, it's remarkable that such a powerful tool has been part of mathematics for more than 2 millennia. Long before the Internet, Euclid's insight was waiting to be applied to a realm he could never have imagined. Today, every secure email, bank transfer, or piece of data locked behind a cipher relies on these age-old principles. Even though the concept of finding a greatest common divisor seems deceptively simple, it remains an unshakable pillar of cryptographic integrity, making sure that, in a world of constantly evolving threats, our digital locks stay firmly bolted. Euler's Totient function. Mathematics underlies much of modern cryptography, and few concepts illustrate this as strikingly as Euler's Totient function. This function, often referred to as phi of n, pronounced phi of n, determines how many numbers less than a given value and share no common divisors with it, except for 1. For example, if n equals 9, the numbers 1, 2, 4, and 6 share no common divisors with 9 except for 1. 5, 7, and 8 do not share any factors with 9, so phi of 9 equals 6. While this might appear to be a simple counting exercise, it underpins the security of RSA, one of the world's most prevalent encryption systems. RSA encryption hinges on a property that multiplication by large primes is easy, but factoring the product of those primes is incredibly difficult. 2 large primes are chosen, their product is calculated, and this product forms a critical part of both the public and private keys. However, ensuring that the encryption process works smoothly requires selecting a particular exponent, and this selection relies on Euler's Totient function. By telling us how many integers up to a certain value are relatively prime to it, the function guarantees that the encryption exponent and other parameters align in such a way that only someone holding the matching private key can reverse the encryption. Because of these properties, phi of n helps create keys that are both practical and intensely hard to crack. On one side, encryption should be quick and convenient for valid users. On the other, it should be maddeningly tough for anyone trying to eavesdrop without authorization. Euler's Totient function provides exactly what's needed to achieve this balance. When the 2 primes are hundreds of digits long, their product becomes formidable to factor, and the result is that no modern computer can realistically unravel the encryption by brute force. In other words, an attacker seeking to break RSA by factoring massive numbers would face a task that could take far longer than a human lifetime, or realistically many lifetimes. What is particularly fascinating is that Leonhard Euler, who discovered this function in the 18th century, never saw a computer, and certainly never imagined something like the Internet. Yet phi n is quietly at work each time someone logs into a secure website, sends encrypted emails, or completes online banking transactions. The reliance on prime factorization to keep messages private stems directly from the number-theoretic properties that Euler investigated long ago. The ongoing threat to RSA comes primarily from emerging quantum computers, which could, in theory, handle the enormous calculations involved in factoring large products of primes much faster than standard machines. Cryptographers are busy developing post-quantum algorithms that might replace or supplement RSA in the future. But for now, Euler's Totient function remains an essential protector of digital security. Its usefulness is rooted in creating problems that are easy to set up, yet massively time-consuming to reverse without privileged information. The fact that a straightforward idea, counting how many integers are relatively prime to another, helps shield our online world, is a testament to the power of mathematics. Whenever you log into a private account, send confidential messages, or shop securely online, you are benefiting from a 300-year-old discovery. Without phi of n ensuring that the encryption exponents behave properly, RSA would become vulnerable, jeopardizing the websites and services that depend on it. Though often overlooked, this function acts as a linchpin in the architecture of modern cryptography, demonstrating that even centuries-old number theory can find fresh purpose in the digital age. Discrete logarithms. Discrete logarithms sit at the core of some of the most reliable systems used to conceal data in the digital realm. Although the idea might initially appear straightforward, determining the power that one number must be raised to in order to produce another, this process becomes anything but simple once modular arithmetic enters the picture. In a normal setting, if 2 to the 5th power is 32, anyone can see that the exponent is 5. Yet, when numbers cycle back on themselves after hitting a certain threshold, the task of working backward from a final result to the original exponent becomes prohibitively difficult. This hidden complexity allows discrete logarithms to serve as a bedrock of strong encryption. A typical example involves picking a number, raising it to some exponent, then reducing the result by dividing it by a modulus, and taking the remainder. Even if someone captures this remainder, they may have little chance of deducing the original exponent without knowing the full details of the calculation. The very property that makes discrete logarithms so unwieldy is precisely what makes them incredibly appealing to cryptography. The difficulty lies in reversing the process where no efficient shortcut has been discovered. As a result, these logarithms supply a layer of protection that has become central to the secure exchange of information online. In many encryption schemes, the need is to compute a certain power quickly, while ensuring that inverting that power is a formidable challenge for any adversary. This principle emerges in a classic arrangement known as the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Two participants who have never met can still generate a shared secret key if they both agree on a public base and a large modulus. Each of them selects a personal secret number, applies an exponentiation under modular arithmetic, and sends the resulting public value across an unsecured channel. Because the discrete logarithm problem is so tough to undo, bystanders who see only the exchanged public numbers have minimal hope of deriving the participants' true secret values. After another quick step of exponentiation, both parties independently arrive at an identical secret key, which can then be used to encrypt messages. This is the underlying idea behind many secure messaging apps. Each user ends up with a matching private key for safe communication, even if prying eyes have monitored the entire exchange process. Another vital application arises in elliptic curve cryptography, which employs a similar one-way trick but on a different mathematical structure. The payoff is that with significantly shorter keys, one can still achieve equivalent security to older methods. That is especially beneficial for devices that do not have powerful processors or large memory reserves. Less computational load translates to faster transactions, reduced battery consumption, and an overall smoother user experience, all while preserving a robust defense against attackers. Because of these advantages, elliptic curve methods are increasingly woven into Internet security protocols and digital asset systems. One might ask why discrete logarithms remain out of reach for standard computers, given that modern processors can tackle millions or even billions of operations every second. The short answer is that reversing exponentiation within modular arithmetic grows exponentially more time-consuming as the numbers get larger. Multiplying two big numbers or dividing one by another can be done swiftly, but identifying the exponent in a discrete log situation forces a machine into a massive search through countless possibilities. Even a specialized device can only test so many exponents before its time and processing power run out. This makes discrete log-based systems attractive to individuals and organizations intent on ensuring that intercepted information remains meaningless to potential eavesdroppers. Yet there is a looming concern. As research progresses on quantum machines, the discrete logarithm problem becomes potentially more vulnerable. Certain quantum algorithms promise to speed up the very factorization and logarithm finding tasks that pose insurmountable obstacles for classical computers. Although fully capable quantum hardware does not yet exist at a scale sufficient to break today's widely used encryption, scientists and cryptographers are preparing for the possibility. Their efforts focus on constructing new post-quantum schemes that even advanced quantum processors will struggle to solve. Nevertheless, for the time being, systems built around discrete logarithms continue to be robust. For everyday users, all this mathematics generally remains invisible. People log into banking sites, exchange encrypted messages, or trade digital assets without realizing that a carefully designed puzzle easy to set up but staggeringly hard to reverse, lies behind their secure connections. The discrete but critical nature of this puzzle is why discrete logarithms stay relevant. They transform a seemingly simple question about exponents into an immensely tough problem, providing a barrier that keeps sensitive data hidden. As long as attempts to crack discrete log-based encryption remain out of reach for ordinary and even high-end computational resources, discrete logarithms will sustain their place as an essential defense in the ongoing struggle to protect digital information. Symmetric versus asymmetric encryption. Encryption quietly safeguards so many everyday tasks, from sending a private text to checking your bank account balance. Yet not all encryption is created alike. Two main approaches, symmetric and asymmetric, run most of the show. Both aim to keep prying eyes away from sensitive data, but each uses distinct methods to lock and unlock information. Knowing how these methods differ sheds light on the strategies that protect our most valuable digital exchanges. Symmetric encryption follows a straightforward idea. It relies on the same secret for both sealing and unsealing data, much like using a single key that opens and closes a sturdy padlock. Because there's no complicated math to pass from one key to another, it operates quickly and efficiently. High-speed requirements, such as encrypting an entire hard drive or securing wireless connections, often call for this approach. A router and a user's device, for instance, share a matching secret to scramble and unscramble data in real time whenever the user hops on a protected network. One weakness is that both sides need to possess the exact same key, which raises the question, how do they share that key without letting a snoop grab it en route? If that exchange is compromised, anyone who grabs the key gains full access to the data meant to stay hidden. Asymmetric encryption tackles this issue by using two separate but related keys. One is public, accessible to anyone who needs to send something securely. The other remains strictly private. If someone wants to transmit confidential information, they use the public key, and only the corresponding private key can untangle the message. This eliminates the challenge of distributing a single shared secret. Nobody ever needs to pass around the private part. Web browsers, for example, rely on this tactic when connecting to a secure site. The site shares a public key, the browser encrypts data with it, and only the site's hidden private key can unscramble what arrives. The same principle drives secure messaging apps that let strangers exchange messages free from unwanted listeners. However, this stronger lock-and-key mechanism involves more intense mathematical operations, slowing it down compared to its single-key counterpart. In practice, both methods blend together to get the best of both worlds. A classic example is what happens under the hood when you visit a site with a tiny lock icon in your browser's address bar. First, there's an asymmetric step. Your device and the site securely exchange a temporary secret key. After that, they switch to a faster symmetric method. The result is a seamless, secure conversation, all happening almost instantly behind the scenes. Thanks to this hybrid approach, you enjoy robust protection without needing to sacrifice speed. The site remains confident that eavesdroppers can't decode the traffic, and your device can handle large amounts of data securely without grinding to a halt. Whether you're uploading a confidential document to cloud storage or chatting with a friend on an encrypted platform, you're likely benefiting from both of these techniques at once. Symmetric encryption delivers lightning-fast performance and is ideal for bulk data. Asymmetric encryption shines when you need to transmit secrets without risking exposure of any single key. Together, they provide a versatile framework that stands up to a wide range of digital threats. By understanding why each exists and how they work in tandem, it becomes clearer how messages and files stay confidential from start to finish. Even in a world filled with ever-evolving technology, these two methods remain cornerstones of secure communications, ensuring that your personal data stays locked away from prying eyes. One-time Pad Encryption. In the ongoing struggle to protect private information, experts have created many ways to scramble data so it can't be read by unauthorized parties. Among these methods, there is one approach so powerful that, in theory, it can never be defeated. Commonly referred to as a one-time pad, this technique takes encryption to its logical extreme by guaranteeing absolute secrecy if certain exact conditions are met. Despite this bulletproof reputation, it has remained largely absent from widespread usage because it clashes with the practical realities of how people and organizations exchange sensitive information. The underlying idea is straightforward. Each character or bit of the original message is paired with a character or bit from a randomly generated key that's precisely the same length as the content being protected. When the message is combined with that key, often by a simple XOR operation in binary contexts, the resulting output is a random string that can't be deciphered without the exact same key. If the key is genuinely random, never reused, and kept entirely hidden from anyone but the intended recipients, there is no discernible pattern to exploit. The encryption does not hinge on clever math that's merely tough to reverse. It relies on pure randomness, which eliminates any chance for a cryptanalyst to brute force or logically deduce the original text. History has shown that this perfect secrecy is more than just theoretical. Intelligence services have used these pads in especially high-stakes situations like military directives or diplomatic cables. The method's claim to invulnerability was notably demonstrated when old spy communications were intercepted. On those occasions when an unbreakable message was cracked, the reason was almost always human error. Keys were reused, poorly generated, or improperly secured. The fault never lay in the underlying principle. As soon as a key gets repeated for separate messages, patterns emerge and open a door to decryption. Similarly, if the key isn't random enough, say generated by a flawed process, analytic techniques may reveal regularities that undermine secrecy. Yet these strict conditions are precisely why this method is unwieldy in everyday life. Keys must be created with authentic randomness, which can be challenging to achieve in large volumes. Both sender and receiver must share the key through a secure channel before any meaningful exchange can happen. There's no point in using an ironclad cipher if the key itself is transmitted over an insecure medium. Even if key delivery is solved, the key must match the size of the data being sent, which becomes infeasible for streaming or large-scale files. And once the data is encrypted and sent, nobody can reuse that same key for any future message. All of these constraints introduce logistical headaches that overshadow the absolute security gained. For everyday internet traffic, like web browsing, email, and financial transactions, modern systems rely on algorithms like AES or RSA, which aren't unbreakable in the strictest sense but are sufficiently resistant to attack while remaining practical. These techniques do rely on assumptions about the difficulty of solving certain mathematical problems, but they integrate smoothly into modern networks and allow key sharing over insecure channels by combining asymmetric strategies with more efficient symmetric methods. The result is a balance between robust protection and the convenience demanded by billions of users exchanging massive amounts of data every day. In specialized contexts, however, the single-use key approach remains valuable. High-level government or military communications, especially for scenarios involving nuclear codes, may still employ a pad-based system to remove even the smallest chance of infiltration. Without perfectly random keys and immaculate key management, though, the concept's protective aura is easily pierced. That means that while this approach may represent the apex of theoretical safety, it cannot meet the day-to-day requirements of typical businesses, media streams, or personal messaging apps. This contrast forms a paradox. Perfect secrecy exists, but the conditions needed to achieve it conflict with the scalability of modern infrastructure and the realities of frequent communication. As a result, the pad method rarely appears outside of niche settings where absolute confidence is worth the considerable overhead. The rest of the world, from e-commerce giants to casual chatter, relies on sophisticated but more flexible ciphers that come close enough to unbreakable for all practical purposes. In that sense, the single-use pad remains the ultimate safeguard in theory, yet too cumbersome to be the default solution for an internet that never sleeps. Public key cryptography. Public key cryptography was a game-changer for secure communication. Before it appeared, cryptography depended on a shared secret key, which raised a glaring question: how to exchange that key safely in the first place. If an attacker intercepted it, everything encrypted with that key was immediately compromised. This problem dominated cryptography for centuries, until researchers discovered a way to protect messages without ever passing around a secret key. The solution involves two keys that are mathematically linked. One is public, so anyone can use it to encrypt a message. The other remains private, and is the only key capable of decrypting that message. Because the public key can be shared openly, there's no need for a risky handover of a single secret. Even if an eavesdropper observes everything except the private key itself, they can't decrypt the protected data. This approach is called asymmetric encryption, and it underpins the secure channels that billions of people rely on for web browsing, email, digital signatures, and more. One of the most recognizable examples of asymmetric encryption is RSA, named for its inventors Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman. The entire system hinges on the difficulty of factoring a huge number that is the product of two randomly chosen, very large prime numbers. Multiplying those primes to produce the public key component is quick work for computers, but reversing the process, figuring out which primes were used, turns into a task so daunting that no one has succeeded in doing it for large enough numbers. That seemingly simple factorization barrier is what makes RSA so robust. Anyone can see the public key, yet uncovering the secret information from it alone requires immense computational power beyond any practical means today. While RSA enables secure messaging, another vital piece of asymmetric cryptography called Diffie-Hellman addresses how two individuals can establish a shared secret key even if they've never exchanged private information before. In this process, each participant picks a secret number and performs specific calculations with certain publicly known values. The results are passed back and forth in the open. Despite that, only each participant's private choice can transform the public data into the final shared key. Outsiders who monitor the entire conversation won't have enough information to reconstruct the secret. This technique helps power end-to-end encryption in popular apps, letting people communicate privately without meeting in person or risking the distribution of a single secret key. Public key methods don't just solve the key exchange conundrum, they also enable authentication. When you digitally sign a file or email with your private key, anyone possessing your public key can verify it came from you and wasn't tampered with in transit. That prevents forgers from posing as legitimate senders. The Internet's Secure Sockets Layer, SSL, and Transport Layer Security, TLS, use asymmetric ciphers to confirm server identities before switching to faster symmetric ciphers. Cryptocurrencies also rely on similar math to prove ownership of digital coins, employing private keys to sign transactions while public keys validate them. Despite these advantages, asymmetric encryption can be slower and more resource-intensive than symmetric methods, since the arithmetic is more complex. Most practical systems combine both styles. They use asymmetric operations to set up a temporary shared secret, then switch to high-speed symmetric encryption for bulk data transmission. This hybrid approach delivers convenience and power without putting secrets at risk during the initial handshake. A looming threat is the advent of quantum computing, which might someday overcome the factoring and discrete logarithm barriers on which RSA and Diffie-Hellman depend. Shor's algorithm, if run on a sufficiently advanced quantum machine, could theoretically unravel large prime factorizations or discrete logs with breathtaking speed. This possibility has prompted cryptographers to develop new forms of post-quantum cryptography that can withstand attacks from quantum hardware. For now, though, public key systems remain integral to digital security. Every time a browser displays a padlock icon or you receive a digitally signed file, you're seeing the genius of asymmetric encryption in action. It might rely on difficult math, but at heart, it's a brilliantly simple idea. A lock to which many can hold the key, paired with a secret that only one holder can wield. Elliptic curve cryptography, ECC. Elliptic curve cryptography, ECC, has emerged as a lean, high-performance alternative to the established RSA system, addressing modern demands for speed and lower resource consumption. Although RSA remains widespread, its security rests on exceptionally large keys, which means extra computational overhead. In contrast, ECC operates with much shorter keys while delivering comparable levels of protection. Instead of relying on the difficulty of factoring huge numbers, ECC derives its strength from a complex puzzle called the elliptic curve discrete logarithm problem. Solving it is prohibitively challenging with current technology, enabling ECC to achieve strong security using, for instance, a 256-bit key rather than RSA's recommended 2048-bit key. That reduction in key size translates to less processing, reduced energy consumption, and faster encryption and decryption, benefits that are vital for smartphones, IoT gadgets, and other devices with limited computational power. A range of real-world implementations highlights ECC's growing acceptance. Many secure websites leverage ECC-based certificates for faster SSL/TLS handshakes. Even cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin utilize ECC for digital signatures, trusting its efficiency and resilience. Government agencies and military organizations also look to elliptic curves for robust security, knowing it grants high-level protection with minimal performance drawbacks. ECC's edge is its ability to balance tight security against modern realities, hardware constraints, high-speed requirements, and ever-increasing data volumes. Although quantum computing may pose a future test for all classical cryptography, ECC generally fares better than RSA for now. Researchers are exploring post-quantum approaches to counter tomorrow's threats. But in the present, ECC stands out as a highly capable method of encrypting data in a world where smaller and faster solutions are increasingly essential. Quantum cryptography and Shor's algorithm. Quantum computing promises to reshape the landscape of digital security by exploiting principles like superposition and entanglement. Instead of bits that take on only 0 or 1, quantum computers use qubits, which can exist in multiple states simultaneously. This allows them to carry out parallel computations that far surpass the capabilities of traditional devices when tackling certain problems, including the factorization of large numbers. Since RSA and elliptic curve cryptography, ECC, both rely on the idea that factoring large numbers or solving discrete logarithms is extraordinarily time-consuming, a sufficiently powerful quantum machine could, in theory, decipher these methods at speeds that render current encryption obsolete. The potential breaking of RSA by quantum algorithms arises primarily from Shor's algorithm, introduced by mathematician Peter Shor in 1994. On a quantum computer with enough stable qubits, this algorithm can factor extremely large numbers efficiently. Although contemporary quantum hardware has relatively few qubits, far below the threshold needed to crack 2048-bit RSA in practice, there is a real concern that a future system with millions of coherent qubits could accomplish in minutes, a task that would take classical machines billions of years. Despite the threat, quantum computing also paves the way for new forms of cryptography. Quantum key distribution, QKD, illustrates this dual nature. Unlike classical systems that rely on the near-impossible nature of certain math problems, QKD uses fundamental physics to detect eavesdropping. Single photons transmit key material. Any interception alters the quantum state of those particles, alerting the communicating parties to a breach. Since these changes cannot be masked, QKD offers a form of perfect secrecy in principle. Although it is still mostly in experimental or specialized use, interest is growing in sectors like finance and government networks that require extremely high levels of security. Another area of active research is post-quantum cryptography. Here, mathematicians and computer scientists craft algorithms that can withstand quantum assaults, usually by pivoting to problems believed resistant to quantum speedups. Examples include lattice-based approaches, code-based schemes, and hash-based systems. These rely on complexities distinct from factoring or discrete logarithms, meaning that even a quantum device would face significant hurdles. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology is in the process of standardizing these methods, and major technology firms and government agencies are beginning to test them. The goal is to transition before quantum hardware becomes potent enough to undermine today's widely used encryption. Exactly when quantum computers will threaten current standards is unknown. Estimates vary, with some experts warning of breakthroughs within a decade or two, while others expect these milestones to lie further in the future. In any case, the transition to quantum-resistant techniques takes time. Organizations must adapt their infrastructure, replace cryptographic libraries, and ensure compatibility across a wide range of devices and software. This process is already underway in many sectors where companies and governments are strategizing how best to safeguard data that must remain confidential for years or even decades. In the meantime, RSA and ECC remain effective against existing threats. But as research accelerates and investment in quantum computing grows, the countdown to a new cryptographic era has begun. Quantum processors may one day overshadow today's security foundations, forcing every institution that depends on data confidentiality to migrate. Whether that shift arrives sooner or later, the progress already made in quantum key distribution and post-quantum algorithms points toward a future where cryptography is resilient enough to fend off even the most powerful quantum attacks. This duality, quantum computing as both menace and shield, will shape the evolution of digital security, making preparation essential for anyone entrusted with protecting critical information. Hash functions and data integrity. Imagine locking away important information in a sealed box, then throwing away the key so nobody can ever reopen it. That image captures the essence of a hash function. Instead of encrypting data for later decryption, a hash function takes an input, be it a file, a password, or a transaction, and transforms it into a fixed-length sequence of characters. This output cannot be reversed, which means no one can take a hash and use it to discover the original data. It is a one-way journey that helps ensure files and messages remain consistent and tamper-resistant. Hashes play a crucial role in data integrity. Suppose you download a software update from the internet. To confirm it hasn't been modified by an attacker, you can compare its hash value to the one provided by the developer. If even one tiny character in the downloaded file differs from the original, the calculated hash will completely change. This property, called the avalanche effect, guarantees that any attempt to alter the underlying data becomes easy to detect, since a single small edit will produce a wildly different hash string. Hashes also protect passwords. When you create a login for a website, the site typically stores only the hash of your chosen password, not the password itself. Next time you sign in, the website hashes what you type and checks whether the result matches the stored hash. If they align, you're granted access. Since the password is never kept in its actual form, anyone who steals the underlying database will only see hash values, and must work very hard to derive the real passwords, an approach that helps shield user credentials from prying eyes. Digital signatures also rely heavily on hashes. Imagine you want to prove a document is authentic and unaltered. By combining a hash with a signer's private key, you create a unique signature that reflects the exact content of the file. Anyone with the signer's public key can confirm that the document hasn't been changed at all since it was signed. If any portion had been altered, the hash comparison would fail, revealing the tampering immediately. Not all hashing algorithms, however, have stood the test of time. MD5 was once a popular choice for verifying file integrity and storing passwords, but it lost credibility when security researchers uncovered weaknesses that make collision attacks feasible. That discovery means different inputs can sometimes produce the same MD5 result, destroying the trust that a hash should be unique to a given piece of data. Because of these weaknesses, MD5 is largely retired for security-sensitive tasks, though it still appears in some legacy systems that only need to detect accidental corruption rather than deliberate attacks. SHA, or Secure Hash Algorithm, has taken over as the stronger and more trusted method. Early versions like SHA-1 eventually showed vulnerabilities as well, prompting the industry to move toward more secure variants, including SHA-256 and SHA-3. These versions have become common in everything from SSL certificates, ensuring safe connections to websites, to blockchain technology, which links blocks of transaction records using references to each block's hash. Any attempt to rewrite past entries on the chain would break these references, immediately making the tampering obvious. Because hash functions appear wherever digital data must remain trustworthy, they play a fundamental role in modern computing. Cryptocurrencies rely on them to validate transactions. Software developers provide checksums so users can verify unaltered downloads, and investigators apply them to confirm digital evidence remains authentic. All these applications bank on the notion that reversing a hash should be near impossible, and that producing the same hash twice from two different pieces of data should be unthinkably difficult. As processors grow faster and attackers become more determined, cryptographers continue to refine hash functions. While SHA-256 remains robust at the moment, many researchers are already designing post-quantum hash schemes to prepare for a future where new computational breakthroughs could pose unexpected risks. However, that future unfolds, one principle will almost certainly remain. A properly designed hash function protects the integrity of digital information by making sure we can detect even the smallest sign of meddling. That invisible seal gives us confidence that what we see and share online remains exactly the way it was intended to be. Perfect forward secrecy, PFS. Think about exchanging thousands of encrypted messages over several years and then discovering that someone has managed to steal your secret key. If each conversation depended on that single key, the intruder could unlock every old message, no matter how far back it goes. Perfect forward secrecy is the safeguard against that nightmare scenario. Its main promise is that even if a key gets compromised in the future, past communications remain off-limits and indecipherable to prying eyes. Most encryption systems rely on keys to scramble and unscramble messages, but many use one long-term key for extended periods. That approach becomes a glaring vulnerability when anyone, from skilled hackers to government agencies, manages to obtain that key. With enough time or resources, they can sift through years' worth of encrypted logs and uncover private discussions, personal details, or financial data that you thought were safe. Perfect forward secrecy avoids this problem by generating temporary keys, sometimes for each individual session or even each message, ensuring that a compromised key only affects a narrow window of data. This strategy means each session or exchange has its own key, unique and ephemeral. Once that session ends, the keys are erased. If someone manages to seize one of these keys, it unlocks only that particular session. Older messages stay encrypted with their own separate keys, and future messages use still other keys. Because older keys are gone, there's no practical way to revisit those messages and decrypt them. For anyone who cares about long-term confidentiality, that protection is invaluable. Perfect forward secrecy appears in many places. An attacker who happens upon one key would only gain access to a limited slice of data, leaving previous exchanges safely out of reach. The same idea shows up in secure websites using HTTPS. If a hacker somehow obtains a website's SSL key, they won't be able to retroactively decode historical traffic that used PFS. This applies to VPN connections as well. An encrypted session is safe even if someone later steals a server's long-term credentials. There are several real-world benefits that come from perfect forward secrecy. First, if an attacker compromises a system and nabs encryption keys, they can't immediately read vast archives of older messages. Only new or in-progress sessions might be at risk. Second, it thwarts large-scale surveillance efforts that store traffic for later decryption. By the time any single key is compromised, the older data is already locked with other deleted keys. Third, it neutralizes the harvest now, decrypt later model, where someone hoards encrypted content until technology catches up and makes decryption simpler. If the keys for that content no longer exist, the attacker is stuck. Implementing perfect forward secrecy isn't free of challenges. Generating and managing new keys on the fly requires more computational overhead, although modern devices handle this far more efficiently than in the past. Systems that cling to older protocols may not be compatible, forcing an upgrade path that can be complicated for large organizations. Another drawback is that with PFS, recovering past communications can become impossible if someone legitimately needs them. Once those ephemeral keys are gone, there is no reset button that brings the data back. Despite these hurdles, perfect forward secrecy is quickly becoming standard practice for anyone serious about protecting privacy. Large platforms like Google and Facebook have already enabled it in various services, and its presence in secure messaging continues to expand. As encryption technology evolves, the principle of forward secrecy is likely to remain a pillar of online security. With ever-advancing threats, from well-funded adversaries to the promise of more powerful computers, knowing that a leak tomorrow won't reveal your messages from yesterday is a relief to anyone who values long-term privacy. Cryptography and banking. Financial transactions occur non-stop across the globe, and cryptography is what prevents them from falling into the wrong hands. Whenever you log into online banking or swipe your card at a store, cryptographic tools protect that flow of personal and financial data. Through encryption, your account numbers and passwords are scrambled, rendering them incomprehensible to any eavesdropper. Digital signatures ensure that each transfer request genuinely originates from you and hasn't been altered along the way. Hashing helps banks confirm that the details of every transaction remain fixed, flagging any attempt at manipulation. Even at ATMs, your PIN is never stored in a vulnerable form. Instead, the machine compares a hashed version of what you enter against what's on file. Extra defenses like two-factor authentication layer another shield, whether it's a texted code or a fingerprint scan. In the background, sophisticated algorithms like AES and SHA-256 transform raw information into a format that unauthorized parties can't decode. Traditional institutions rely on centralized servers to coordinate all these transactions, but newer approaches, such as blockchain systems, rely on cryptographic consensus methods that eliminate single points of failure. Banks worldwide keep innovating to keep pace with emerging threats, preparing for the challenges that powerful quantum processors could bring. For now, every time you make a deposit, check your balance, or pay for an online purchase, remember that cryptography silently secures your data, preserving the trust we place in modern finance. The math behind Bitcoin and blockchain. Bitcoin introduced a way to move value online without relying on a central authority. Instead of banks or governments, it uses a public ledger called the blockchain and a set of cryptographic methods that let people exchange digital tokens securely. When someone transfers Bitcoin, no physical object changes hands. Instead, an entry is added to a ledger that everyone can see, ensuring that ownership records remain transparent. This system depends on a combination of mathematical tools, digital signatures to prove who controls specific funds, and hash functions to preserve the order of transactions in a tamper-evident chain of data blocks. A typical transaction begins when a user decides to send some units of Bitcoin. That person has a private key, which remains hidden, and a public key visible to anyone. The private key is used to sign outgoing transfers, indicating legitimate ownership of the coins. Observers on the network can check the signature with the corresponding public key, confirming the transaction originated with the rightful party, while never exposing the secret itself. This approach prevents fraud because forging a valid signature would require access to the private key, which remains under the user's control. Altering a signed transaction, such as raising the transferred amount, invalidates the signature, making any manipulation immediately obvious. Users broadcast signed transactions to a network of computers called nodes. Each node verifies the incoming data for correctness, ensuring no one attempts to spend funds that do not belong to them or reuse the same coins multiple times. Once a transaction meets basic criteria, it awaits inclusion in a new batch of data, known as a block. These blocks each reference the one before it, creating a continuously growing record. To link blocks securely, Bitcoin relies on hash functions which transform arbitrary data into a fixed-length string that appears random. Altering even one small piece of data radically changes its hash output. Each block includes a unique hash of the previous block, and any subsequent block depends on that reference. An attacker hoping to rewrite past transactions would need to regenerate the altered block's hash, then redo the work for every later block. This requirement makes retroactive changes impractical once new blocks have been built on top of older ones. Before a block is finalized, it must pass through a process called mining. Nodes that participate in mining gather pending transactions and assemble them into a candidate block. They then run a computational challenge known as proof of work. It involves hashing the block's contents along with a variable called a nonce, aiming to produce a hash with certain properties, typically a sequence of leading zeros. Because there is no shortcut to predict which nonce will yield the desired hash, mining demands repeated attempts, sometimes numbering in the trillions, until a valid result emerges. The first miner to uncover a valid hash broadcasts it, and if other nodes confirm it is correct, the block is appended to the ledger. The successful miner earns new Bitcoin as a reward. This labor-intensive procedure keeps the entire network honest. To fake a transaction or remove an old entry, an attacker would need enough computational power to remine not just the modified block, but every block after it. Recalculation becomes exponentially more difficult with each new addition to the chain, because the global network of miners devotes vast resources to securing the ledger. Any malicious party attempting to surpass the network's combined capacity faces astronomical costs. This design ensures that no individual or small group can override the historical record, maintaining a robust defense against censorship or fraud. Bitcoin's reliance on mathematics rather than trust makes it different from traditional financial institutions. Instead of a central authority settling disputes, the protocol's rules impose consensus. Transactions are valid only if they follow the cryptographic conditions enforced by the software everyone runs. Digital signatures validate rightful ownership, and hash-linked blocks protect the record from silent revision. the system's resilience emerges from participants acting in self-interest. Miners expend resources to win rewards, and users trust the ledger precisely because altering it requires extreme computational might. Some worry that future advances in computing, particularly quantum technology, could undermine Bitcoin's core assumptions. A sufficiently advanced quantum computer might, in theory, solve the discrete math problems at the heart of digital signatures or find hash collisions more easily. Researchers are exploring post-quantum cryptography to swap in alternative techniques not vulnerable to quantum attacks. It is widely expected that the Bitcoin protocol would upgrade its cryptographic primitives if quantum breakthroughs reached a point of genuine threat. Until then, the existing combination of elliptic curve signatures, secure hashing, and proof of work offers robust protection against known attack methods. Far from magic, Bitcoin is a testament to a careful arrangement of cryptographic ideas. Each transaction is signed to prove authenticity. Each block is hashed to seal it in place, and every miner competes to solve these puzzles for potential rewards. No matter how large or widespread the network grows, the shared ledger remains unified by these intricate calculations, preventing unauthorized spending and deterring attempts to manipulate past records. By blending peer-to-peer networking with cryptography, Bitcoin showcases how mathematical rules can govern a decentralized economic system that operates around the clock, free from reliance on central intermediaries. End-to-end encryption in messaging apps. End-to-end encryption allows two people to exchange messages so that only they can read them, locking out everyone else, including the service provider itself. Instead of encrypting data merely when it travels across the internet, this system transforms the message into unreadable form right on the sender's device. Then only the recipient's device can restore it to normal text. Anyone who intercepts the encrypted content, whether they are hackers, governments, or the company hosting the chat app, sees only random symbols. Because the keys needed to decrypt the information remain with the communicating parties, there is no central vault holding a master key that an attacker could steal or a provider could hand over, which makes eavesdropping vastly more difficult. Each participant has a public key, visible to anyone who wants to send them a secret, and a private key, which must never be shared. When Alice writes to Bob, her phone fetches Bob's public key to scramble the message. Bob's phone applies his private key, known only to him, to unscramble what arrives. If a criminal intercepts the communication or the app's servers are breached, the contents remain unintelligible. In systems like Signal, perfect forward secrecy adds another layer of defense by generating fresh keys at intervals. So even if someone later obtains a user's key, older messages remain locked away. Some services collect less personal data and refrain from storing older chats, while others, such as iMessage, do protect the text, but may leave a loophole in backups if those are not secured end-to-end. Telegram, by contrast, requires users to enable secret chats to get this same degree of confidentiality, since standard chats go through the company's servers unencrypted. Law enforcement agencies around the world often complain that such systems blind them to potentially vital evidence by preventing them from intercepting a suspect's conversations. They argue that if criminals hide behind end-to-end encryption, investigations become more complicated, and there are occasional calls for backdoors, letting authorized parties decrypt messages on demand. Security specialists respond that a deliberate backdoor poses a monumental risk for everyone. Any vulnerability built for law enforcement can be exploited by cybercriminals and hostile entities, undermining the entire premise of safe communication. Once a cryptographic shield is deliberately weakened, it ceases to protect regular users. Journalists, activists, and others who depend on private communications might be at particular risk if governments or hackers discover hidden ways to bypass encryption. These debates unfold as more people rely on messaging apps for everything from personal conversations to sensitive business discussions. The threat of quantum computing hangs in the background, since quantum machines may someday crack today's cryptography more easily. Researchers are already exploring post-quantum algorithms to replace or reinforce existing schemes, but such changes will take time to adopt. In the meantime, end-to-end encryption stands as the strongest readily available option for shielding personal data from prying eyes. Metadata, such as who talks to whom and when, often remains visible to providers, though the content itself is locked. As technology moves forward, concerns persist about how to reconcile legitimate investigative needs with the public's right to private speech. For now, the magic of secure chats continues to rest on the unbroken math behind end-to-end encryption, keeping billions of messages safely out of reach except for those who hold the keys. TLS and SSL, keeping websites secure. When you see a padlock icon in your browser's address bar, it means the website you're visiting is protected by an encryption protocol called TLS, which replaced the older SSL. This setup transforms data into a scrambled format, preventing eavesdroppers from seeing your passwords, credit card numbers, or personal details as they travel between your device and the website's server. When you visit a page that uses HTTPS instead of HTTP, your browser and the server perform a handshake. The site shows a digital certificate issued by a trusted authority. You confirm its authenticity, and they exchange temporary keys for fast, symmetric encryption. Only then does the padlock appear, signaling that any information you send will remain unintelligible to outsiders. If an attacker attempts to intercept or modify the communication, the encryption reveals that tampering took place. Although people still talk about SSL certificates, modern security relies on TLS 1.2 or 1.3, which are far more resilient against known attacks. This prevents man-in-the-middle exploits, ensures data integrity, and validates that the site genuinely belongs to whoever claims to run it. Sites that fail to use TLS or rely on outdated methods leave data exposed, allowing cybercriminals to intercept and read private details. Browsers now warn users when pages lack encryption or present suspicious certificates, indicating it may be unsafe to submit personal information. Trusted certificate authorities issue a range of certificates, from simple domain validation to stricter types that verify the actual organization. Whichever level they choose, site owners need to stay current with best practices to maintain user trust. The move toward a fully encrypted web is driven by privacy expectations, evolving standards, and the desire to shield everyone from snooping. Innovations like TLS 1.3 quicken connections and strengthen ciphers, while researchers anticipate quantum computing's potential for breaking older methods and work on post-quantum measures that will maintain the padlock's promise of security. Checking for that icon is a simple step, but it makes a profound difference. Your logins, banking, and other online activities remain safe behind a robust layer of cryptography, ensuring nobody can peek at what you transmit or alter it in transit. Cryptography and password storage. Websites that prioritize security never store passwords in plain text. Instead, they rely on a process called hashing, which transforms a password into an irreversible string of characters. Even minor differences in the password produce an entirely different hash, making it impossible to recover the original text once it has been processed. When someone logs in, the system compares a hash of the typed password with the hash stored in its database. If they match, access is granted. If not, the login fails. This approach prevents immediate damage if an attacker steals a database, because all they find are hash values instead of actual passwords. Yet basic hashing alone cannot stop more sophisticated attacks. If two people choose the same password, they will end up with the same hash. Hackers often use rainbow tables, which are vast collections of pre-computed hashes for common passwords to quickly crack weak credentials. To address this, developers add a random piece of data called a salt to each password before hashing it, so that identical passwords no longer create identical hashes. Each user's salt is unique, meaning attackers have to work through every salted hash individually, rather than running one large lookup against a shared hash pattern. Even when salted, passwords can still be brute-forced if attackers have enough computing power. Hashing can be very fast, and a determined adversary might attempt millions of guesses per second. To slow them down, many systems use algorithms like bcrypt, PBKDF2, or Argon2, which make hashing more computationally expensive. By rehashing the password multiple times or using memory-intensive techniques, they stretch the effort required for each guess, making large-scale attacks far less practical. These methods provide strong protection for stored passwords and give legitimate users better odds of staying safe. A common mistake is password reuse. If you pick one password and repeat it across multiple sites, a breach at any one of them puts your entire digital footprint in jeopardy. Attackers try the stolen password on other services, a practice known as credential stuffing, and often find that people use the same login details for email, social media, or even financial platforms. This can lead to dire outcomes, since a single compromised website can unlock a chain reaction of unauthorized logins. Security experts advise picking a unique, complex password for each account, or using a password manager that generates and remembers random strings for you. Weak passwords also pose a serious risk. Simple ones like 123456 or password can be cracked in seconds, especially with modern hardware and well-known attacking methods. Strong passwords should be long, unpredictable, and composed of random characters so they defy quick guesses or dictionary-based attacks, including uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols helps even more. Ideally, a user never reuses any of those passwords, relying instead on software tools that store them safely and automatically fill them in when needed. Many websites now encourage two-factor authentication, adding another checkpoint. You might be required to confirm a code sent to your phone or use a biometric scan, so that even if an attacker steals your password, they still lack the second factor. Going further, some companies have begun exploring passwordless logins, in which users rely on cryptographic keys stored on their devices or use hardware tokens. Even so, hashing, salting, and key stretching will remain core tactics for securing all kinds of secret data in the foreseeable future, because they drastically reduce the damage a database leak can cause. Taken together, these precautions help keep your credentials safe. If you notice a service storing your password in plain text or neglecting to salt and hash it, you risk losing more than just one account. A single compromised password can cascade into multiple breaches if you reuse it. By treating passwords as carefully as cash, never sharing them, and never using the same one across sites, you protect yourself from the most common attacks and ensure that even a large-scale hack won't open the doors to every corner of your digital life. Zero-knowledge proofs. Zero-knowledge proofs allow someone to demonstrate they know a secret or satisfy a requirement without revealing any details about it. Instead of showing an ID that lists your full name and date of birth, you can prove you're over 18 without exposing those specifics. This feat relies on three principles. Completeness. An honest prover always convinces the verifier if the claim is true. Soundness. No one can fake knowledge if they don't actually have it. And zero knowledge. The verifier learns nothing else beyond the claim being valid. A classic example involves a circular cave with two entrances and a locked door inside. A person who knows the secret to open it can enter from one side and exit from the other, while a verifier waits outside. The verifier randomly requests which side the person should use to come out, and if they guess correctly many times in a row, the verifier concludes the person must possess the secret, even though the method for unlocking the door remains hidden. By repeating tests, the verifier grows increasingly sure that no trickery is involved. This idea has broad applications. Cryptocurrencies like Zcash employ zero-knowledge proofs to confirm users have enough funds for transactions without divulging how much money they actually hold. Ethereum's research on ZKS, NARKS, and ZKS, seeks to make blockchain transactions more private and scalable. Authentication systems can use a similar approach so that websites verify you know a password without ever seeing it, reducing the risk of database leaks. The same logic can secure voting processes, revealing only that a vote is legitimate instead of who was chosen. As data privacy becomes more urgent, zero-knowledge techniques help solve the tension between confirming crucial facts and preserving confidentiality. Ongoing improvements aim to make proofs faster and easier to implement, opening the door to secure identity checks, private transactions, and a host of online interactions where sharing minimal information is essential. By proving just what's needed, and nothing more, zero-knowledge protocols could fundamentally reshape our approach to digital trust. Digital signatures let individuals and organizations validate electronic documents without relying on pen and ink methods prone to forgery. They accomplish this by applying cryptographic functions that demonstrate both who signed the file and that its contents have remained unchanged since the moment of signing. Unlike a simple scanned autograph, which anyone might copy and paste onto another page, a digital signature ties the signer's private key to a hashed version of the document's data, making counterfeits or secret edits effectively impossible to hide. When you receive a digitally signed file, you use the signer's public key to confirm the signature's validity, checking that the hash still matches. If even a single character were altered, the verification would fail, revealing tampering instantly. This assures authenticity, proving the signer's identity, integrity, showing no modifications, and non-repudiation. The signer cannot deny their action. Companies and governments around the world rely on these signatures for contracts, software releases, or secure emails because of the certainty they provide. If a vendor digitally signs an important patch, users can confirm it really came from that specific source and was never corrupted in transit. Financial institutions accept digital signatures on forms and agreements, reducing the need for paper trails and courier services, while courts in many jurisdictions accept them as legally binding evidence. Two main cryptographic components make this possible: a private key under the signer's exclusive control, and a public key available to anyone needing to validate signatures. The private key encrypts a short digest of the file, known as a hash, and the public key decrypts it back, letting recipients compare it to their own hash of the document. That match indicates everything is legitimate. Handwritten signatures do not detect subsequent changes to a contract, but digital versions do. This difference eliminates the possibility of discreetly altering terms after the signer has confirmed their agreement. It also prevents forgeries, which typically involve copying someone's autograph. Because digital signatures are created using mathematical operations, they do not resemble a name scrawled on a page, removing the chance of tracing. At the same time, advanced algorithms keep the signature unique to the document and the signer. As stronger computers come online, experts track whether modern cryptographic methods might eventually be outmatched. Quantum computing, in theory, could undermine certain encryption standards, so researchers are already exploring post-quantum schemes to protect digital signatures in the long run. For now, they remain a vital tool for online security. They streamline contract workflows, safeguard email authenticity, and ensure that downloaded software arrives exactly as intended. With nearly all businesses increasingly reliant on digital operations, digital signatures reinforce trust and efficiency in a climate where data breaches, identity theft, and fraud are constant dangers. Once a file is signed, no one can credibly alter or deny it, making digital signatures indispensable for any environment where certainty and integrity matter. Homomorphic encryption. Homomorphic encryption tackles the challenge of performing computations on data while it remains encrypted, removing the need to expose sensitive details. Normally, to analyze private records, a server must decrypt them, creating a risky window. With homomorphic schemes, the data stays scrambled, yet arithmetic operations still yield valid outputs. Only when the owner retrieves the final result is it decrypted, so no intermediate step discloses secrets. This method is valuable for cloud analytics, where organizations want external processing without trusting another party with plain text. Some systems are partially homomorphic, supporting repeated addition or multiplication, while fully homomorphic methods permit unlimited operations. Though the latter can be slow, it enables scenarios like medical data analysis without revealing patient details or training machine learning models on encrypted sets. Financial institutions can run evaluations on private transaction logs, ensuring confidentiality. The approach keeps the balance between data utility and privacy, in contrast to older methods that require decryption for real processing. The principal hurdle is performance. Operating on large inputs with these schemes is time-intensive, yet researchers optimize algorithms and explore hardware acceleration to narrow the gap. Major providers see potential in offering homomorphic encryption services, letting companies outsource computations without relinquishing raw data. As encryption standards evolve to fend off powerful threats, including quantum attacks, homomorphic approaches may rise in importance, granting both individual and corporate users genuine privacy. By skipping decryption, they allow secure collaboration while ensuring that only the key holder can ever see genuine content. Already, small-scale proofs show that encrypted voting, private statistics, and confidential rank checking can all function without reading raw inputs. If the technology continues to mature, it could safeguard medical research, personal finance, and AI experiments, revolutionizing how data is shared worldwide. Side-channel attacks. Side-channel attacks bypass the complexity of brute-forcing cryptographic algorithms by focusing on physical or behavioral clues that machines emit during encryption operations. Instead of factoring large numbers or solving advanced math, attackers measure factors such as timing, power usage, or electromagnetic emissions to glean secret keys. A system might take slightly longer to handle certain bits of data if the key has specific properties, letting an observer piece together the entire key through repeated measurements. Similarly, minute variations in voltage or CPU acoustics can betray sensitive operations. These techniques have been used against smart cards, where differences in power consumption reveal how a card processes each step of an encryption routine. In some demonstrations, simply placing a small antenna near a computer allows interception of electromagnetic signals that correlate with internal computations. Attackers can thus retrieve private information even when the underlying cryptographic algorithm remains mathematically sound. Such exploits pose a threat to hardware-based security modules, phones, embedded systems, and even air-gapped machines. Defending against side-channel attacks involves implementing countermeasures at both hardware and software levels. Developers can write constant-time code, ensuring that operations always take the same duration and do not leak data through timing differentials. Randomization methods add noise to measurements, frustrating attempts to deduce patterns. Hardware designers may include shielding, specialized circuit layouts, or power masking features that obscure the processor's internal states. High-security environments sometimes encase devices in protective enclosures that block emissions or run them in sealed rooms that dampen external monitoring. As encryption algorithms become more resistant to mathematical attacks, these indirect techniques gain appeal for adversaries. Organizations handling valuable secrets must factor in side-channel defenses, or risk letting hackers observe equipment behavior and glean protected keys without ever cracking the underlying cipher. Man-in-the-middle attacks, MITM. A man-in-the-middle attack occurs when someone secretly interposes themselves between two communicating parties, capturing or modifying data without either side realizing that their conversation has been compromised. This scenario poses a significant threat to online security because users may believe their channels are safe, when, in fact, a malicious actor is intercepting every piece of information exchanged. Even robust encryption can be undermined if the attacker manipulates the steps taken to establish a secure session, or if users are lured into connecting through a hostile network. A typical case might involve a victim trying to log into a trusted service while connected to a rogue Wi-Fi hotspot. The attacker then invisibly sits between the user and the legitimate site, relaying messages in real time. Because the attacker can decrypt and re-encrypt data on the fly, each side may see nothing suspicious. The user believes they are talking directly to the legitimate site, and the site believes it is dealing with the genuine user. Meanwhile, the man in the middle can gather credentials, alter transaction amounts, or inject harmful scripts. This form of attack exploits weaknesses in verification processes, as well as in network setups. If a site relies on encryption alone without properly verifying that the other party is who they claim to be, an attacker can present fraudulent certificates or redirect traffic to an imposter domain. In many man-in-the-middle attacks, the victim never notices a difference. The web address might appear correct, or the attacker may seamlessly forward all requests to the intended server. Sometimes a slight misconfiguration is enough, such as an overlooked security alert or an unencrypted fallback connection that can be downgraded by a cunning adversary. Meanwhile, public or corporate Wi-Fi networks can be magnets for attackers, since they allow a determined individual to set up the network itself or tamper with existing hardware in order to capture user data. One classic example of such an interception involves criminals setting up a fake wireless access point in a coffee shop or airport lounge, labeling it with a believable name to trick people into joining. Unaware of the risk, users connect, and from that moment onward, all their web traffic is channeled through the attacker's device. If the attacker employs techniques like SSL stripping, they can downgrade encrypted connections to plain text, invisibly bridging the victim's session to the real site while reading any sensitive details passed along. In other cases, the intruder might use a valid but compromised certificate to impersonate a reputable domain. If the victim's device fails to detect or warn against this certificate anomaly, the infiltration remains undetected. These attacks can be either passive or active. A passive man in the middle might quietly record everything, gathering usernames, passwords, or personal messages for future use. An active attack, by contrast, modifies data in transit, for instance, changing the destination account number in a bank transaction, or altering the content of an email before it reaches the recipient. Active attackers can also display false confirmations back to the user, making the malicious changes look legitimate. By the time the victim realizes something is off, the damage may be done. Additionally, some criminals combine social engineering with their intercept to prompt users into disclosing information or clicking fraudulent links that appear as though they were sent by a legitimate source. Defending against these intrusions involves multiple layers of security. First, there is the concept of certificate pinning, or robust certificate validation, ensuring that the user's browser or application refuses to trust suspicious certificates. This reduces the likelihood of a silent substitution of the genuine site's cryptographic credentials. Second, many organizations stress the use of end-to-end encryption and multi-factor authentication, so that even if an attacker obtains credentials, they cannot fully access the account or decrypt the content. Third, individuals are encouraged to avoid sending private data over unsecured or unfamiliar wireless networks. A virtual private network offers some protection by encrypting everything at the network level, thwarting attempts to read or modify data in transit. Meanwhile, modern web browsers now highlight secure connections with prominent indicators and generate warnings when a site's certificate is suspect. These improvements help users notice if a session has fallen back to an unprotected mode, or if something unusual is happening behind the scenes. Phishing sites add yet another dimension to the danger. Sometimes the man in the middle is not simply eavesdropping, but is also hosting a perfectly replicated login page, prompting the user to input passwords or one-time codes. The attacker captures this information, immediately transmits it to the real service for authentication, and relays the verification back to the user. Everything appears valid, yet the user has unwittingly handed over crucial secrets to a criminal. Researchers have documented real-world scenarios where advanced criminals combine these techniques with local network interception to create a powerful trap. The best protection in such cases is vigilance, plus an understanding of how legitimate sites handle their authentication flows. If anything appears inconsistent, or if the browser issues certificate warnings, users should be wary and refrain from entering their credentials. Modern cryptographic protocols, such as TLS 1.3 and DNS over HTTPS, aim to reduce the risk of being tricked into connecting to a false domain or accepting a downgraded connection. By encrypting both the data and aspects of the session setup, these protocols close loopholes that attackers might otherwise exploit. Still, vulnerabilities can arise if a device's operating system is outdated, or if the user does not pay attention to warnings about invalid certificates. Similarly, corporate environments sometimes intercept encrypted traffic for legitimate security inspection, but this approach can also become a weak point if misconfigured, effectively creating a sanctioned man-in-the-middle scenario. If an employee's computer trusts the company's root certificate, attackers who obtain that certificate could impersonate any website. Another facet of man-in-the-middle threats involves session hijacking. When a user logs in, a session token is created to keep them authenticated. If an attacker can snatch that token, say by sniffing network traffic or exploiting a cross-site scripting flaw, they can impersonate the victim for as long as the session remains valid. Even though the user originally used a secure connection, if an attacker invisibly coerces the user's browser into sending the token over an unencrypted channel, or if the attacker forces a fallback to an older protocol, that data becomes exposed. Websites are encouraged to mark their session cookies as secure and employ HTTP strict transport security, which directs browsers to always use HTTPS and refuse to downgrade connections. As technology advances, man-in-the-middle tactics evolve. Some adversaries rely on state-sponsored resources, injecting themselves into internet infrastructure at large scale, capturing and manipulating data for surveillance or sabotage. Others, with smaller aims, may simply set up a device near a target's home network, waiting for an opportunity to harvest information. The ongoing deployment of encrypted DNS and the widespread adoption of secure protocols help mitigate this threat. But complacency is dangerous. Attackers look for any slip, like an overlooked invalid certificate notice, a misconfigured router, or an insecure default gateway. Ultimately, the lesson is that encryption alone is not foolproof. The entire chain of trust, from DNS resolution and certificate validation to user vigilance, must function correctly. A man in the middle does not need to break the underlying cipher if they can simply fool each side into accepting their presence as legitimate. By maintaining strong certificate checks, employing two-factor authentication, using secure network connections whenever possible, and applying patches promptly, one drastically reduces the window for such attacks. Educating people about the subtle signs, like suspicious browser warnings or domain mismatches, can also prevent them from blindly marching into a trap. Man-in-the-middle attacks illustrate that secure communication demands more than robust algorithms. Effective implementation, consistent vigilance, and a well-tended security ecosystem matter just as much. If any part of the process fails, attackers can slip between sender and receiver, capturing passwords, altering messages, and wreaking havoc on sensitive transactions. While the Internet has grown safer with better encryption standards, cunning adversaries remain keen on intercepting data flows. Only by appreciating these threats and taking suitable precautions can individuals and organizations maintain confidence that their online interactions are free from prying eyes. Cryptographic backdoors. Many governments see backdoors as a way to tackle serious crimes and terrorism, believing law enforcement should have the means to read encrypted messages if they present a genuine threat. Meanwhile, cryptographers and privacy advocates fear that building in official access points would compromise security for everyone, since any vulnerability introduced for the good guys can eventually be discovered and exploited by malicious parties. The tension between these positions has sparked ongoing debates about the balance of civil rights, public safety, and the integrity of secure communications. A cryptographic backdoor typically takes the form of a hidden key or algorithmic weakness that empowers certain agencies or trusted authorities to bypass encryption. One approach might be storing a master key, which decrypts any data encrypted by a particular method. Another might be requiring companies to hand over keys to a government repository upon request. Proponents claim such mechanisms are vital to national security. Critics warn that any stored key would become a high-value prize for cybercriminals. Should that key be compromised, no update or patch would fix the damage, because the very heart of the encryption system would be nullified. Officials argue that strong encryption can shield criminals from detection, enabling trafficking, terrorism, or money laundering. They say allowing lawful intercept is no different from serving a legal warrant in the offline world. Privacy defenders counter by pointing out how easily such intercepts could be abused. Throughout history, governments have proven they're not always above political surveillance or overreach. If a system's architecture mandates universal access points, authoritarian regimes gain a straightforward avenue to monitor dissidents, and democratic states might see mission creep, using new powers in ways originally deemed off-limits. High-profile disputes highlight the controversy. The 2016 FBI versus Apple standoff arose after the FBI sought Apple's help to break into an iPhone used by a mass shooter. Apple refused, arguing that creating a custom backdoor tool would threaten the security of all iPhone users by establishing a dangerous precedent. Though the FBI eventually accessed the phone through a third-party hack, the case showcased the broader conflict. If a tool for legitimate investigation exists, it's only a matter of time before hostile actors try to obtain or replicate it. Historically, attempts at introducing official backdoors have encountered serious flaws. In the 1990s, the Clipper chip initiative in the U.S. aimed to embed a special chip in devices that law enforcement could unlock via escrowed keys. Security experts immediately highlighted multiple weaknesses, and public outcry helped sink the project. Decades later, leaked NSA documents revealed secret efforts to weaken certain encryption standards, undermining global trust in U.S.-based companies and spurring foreign governments to develop alternative solutions. The consistent lesson is that once an intentional weakness is introduced, it's never guaranteed to remain under exclusive control. Moreover, many backdoor proposals fail to address the global nature of technology. Even if, say, the U.S. passes a law compelling phone and messaging providers to maintain universal access points, foreign services with robust encryption could circumvent those mandates, putting legitimate users at a disadvantage while sophisticated criminals switch to unregulated systems. This dynamic raises questions about whether such legislation genuinely stops criminals or mainly hampers law-abiding citizens? From a purely technical standpoint, encryption is designed so that only holders of the right keys can decrypt the data. To insert a backdoor that only authorized parties can exploit fundamentally breaks that premise. Encryption either remains mathematically secure or it doesn't. There's no partial solution that stands up indefinitely. If an algorithm is compromised by design, it's only a matter of time until determined entities replicate the exploit, especially as computing resources evolve. Governments promise strict oversight and secure storage of any master keys. However, even the biggest intelligence agencies have suffered breaches. Insiders may leak information, external adversaries may infiltrate key repositories, and sophisticated hacking campaigns may target the backdoor itself. Privacy advocates stress that robust encryption isn't solely about protecting criminals. Journalists depend on it to safeguard sources. Businesses rely on it to keep trade secrets away from competitors. And everyday citizens use it to defend personal information from identity thieves. Healthcare providers store sensitive patient files, banks handle massive troves of financial records, and social media platforms process billions of private conversations daily. A single point of weakness, like a mandated backdoor, could trigger catastrophic privacy violations or financial havoc if exploited on a broad scale. Despite these dangers, some law enforcement voices insist that an all-or-nothing perspective is too extreme, urging a compromise wherein backdoors are only activated under judicial oversight. They say ignoring intelligence that could save lives is equally irresponsible. In practice, though, the feasibility of maintaining a carefully guarded universal key while guaranteeing zero leaks or abuses has never been convincingly demonstrated. The cryptographic community remains skeptical, citing decades of experience in which supposedly hidden vulnerabilities surfaced, leading to wide-scale breaches. There's also the question of whether governments truly need a ready-made backdoor. Investigators often rely on metadata, which is unencrypted, to trace suspects. They seize devices physically and attempt forensic analysis. Some agencies approach private firms that specialize in zero-day exploits or phone cracking tools. These alternative techniques can be effective for targeted investigations, without demanding that every encryption system worldwide build in a break glass option. Observers also point out that criminals adapt rapidly. If forced backdoors become the norm, dangerous groups may simply pivot to obscure or proprietary solutions beyond state jurisdiction. Meanwhile, legitimate users and corporations would bear the brunt of living with weakened security or facing legal penalties for noncompliance. The result could be a fragmented digital landscape where dedicated criminals are unaffected by mainstream vulnerabilities, but average citizens remain exposed. With the looming prospect of quantum computing, governments worry that existing encryption might one day be insufficient. That concern can fuel arguments for backdoors, yet quantum threats are equally relevant to state secrets. Most experts advocate migrating to post-quantum cryptography rather than crippling today's encryption standards in hopes of enabling lawful intercept. The presence of an intentional flaw in tomorrow's post-quantum algorithms could be magnitudes more dangerous given the advanced capabilities such machines would offer. Proponents of privacy consider robust encryption a fundamental right in a world saturated with digital exchanges. They note the chilling effect on free speech if everyone assumes their government might be watching. On the other side, police agencies continue to present cases where encrypted devices and messages seem to hamper vital investigations, suggesting that lives could be at stake. Yet the debate typically comes back to the same crux. Is compromising overall security worth the incremental gains in specific cases? In many democratic nations, public sentiment leans toward resisting backdoors, buoyed by revelations of mass surveillance programs. Businesses, especially global tech giants, fear losing consumer trust if they quietly collaborate with authorities. They also risk ceding competitive advantage to rivals in jurisdictions without backdoor requirements. Meanwhile, authoritarian regimes already demand near-complete access to citizens' communications, illustrating the worst-case scenario of mandated cooperation. Ultimately, the debate over cryptographic backdoors may never find a simple resolution. Each side perceives vital interests at stake: public safety versus privacy, law enforcement capability versus global cybersecurity resilience. Any path forward must grapple with the reality that encryption underpins modern finance, telehealth, and countless other arenas. If governments impose universal key escrow or forced vulnerabilities, they risk significant backlash from industry, the technical community, and the public. For now, most mainstream encryption solutions remain free of official backdoors, though pressure from law enforcement continues. Moves in countries like Australia and the UK demonstrate that some legislatures and agencies are still inclined to push for universal access to user data, ignoring repeated warnings from cryptographers. Whether these tensions escalate into broader restrictions or spark innovation in more secure technologies is an ongoing question. The essential truth remains unchanged. Building backdoors is straightforward compared to keeping them exclusively in trusted hands and permanently hidden from those with the means to exploit them. Given the scale and sophistication of modern threats, many experts insist that an intentionally flawed encryption framework puts everyone at risk. Post-quantum cryptography. Post-quantum cryptography emerged out of the growing realization that the powerful quantum computers of tomorrow could decimate much of today's standard encryption. Current algorithms like RSA and elliptic curve cryptography, while incredibly secure against classical machines, depend on mathematical problems that might yield far more quickly to quantum-based methods. Shor's algorithm, proposed by Peter Shor in 1994, demonstrated that a sufficiently advanced quantum computer could factor large numbers in polynomial time, effectively disabling the foundations of RSA. Similarly, discrete logarithms, which underpin elliptic curve cryptography, ECC, become tractable with a powerful enough quantum device. This potential upheaval threatens to dissolve the cornerstone of digital security that underpins communication, e-commerce, and sensitive data transfers worldwide. The looming possibility of quantum decryption is not purely theoretical. While present quantum computers remain relatively limited, major technology firms and governments continue investing heavily in the technology. The impetus behind these investments is diverse, ranging from breakthroughs in material science to more efficient drug discovery, but cryptography looms large on the horizon. It's widely accepted that when quantum computing hits a certain threshold, known as cryptographically relevant quantum computing, it will be able to break key sizes once thought secure. Even if that reality is several years or even decades away, the vast infrastructure of digital communications cannot shift overnight. It takes time to migrate entire systems, so the idea of harvest now, decrypt later arises, wherein malicious actors stockpile encrypted information in anticipation of future quantum breakthroughs. By the time the quantum hardware matures, that stored data could be decrypted, rendering confidential records and secrets fully exposed. Post-quantum cryptography, sometimes abbreviated as PQC, seeks to address this challenge by providing new cryptographic schemes that quantum machines cannot readily defeat. Significantly, PQC still uses classical frameworks. No quantum hardware is required to use or verify them, and it aims to ensure that even a large-scale quantum adversary cannot crack codes in a reasonable time frame. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has led a global initiative to identify and standardize quantum-resistant algorithms. This effort began around 2016, culminating in multiple rounds of proposals, tests, and scrutiny by cryptographers worldwide. By mid-2022, NIST had announced a final set of candidate algorithms for both encryption and digital signatures, including lattice-based methods like Kyber and dilithium, code-based approaches such as classic Michaelis, and hash-based or multivariate schemes that offer varied advantages and trade-offs. Lattice-based cryptography stands out as one of the most promising areas of research and adoption. It relies on problems like the learning with errors (LWE) assumption, which poses that certain structured lattices in high-dimensional spaces are extremely difficult to solve, even for a quantum computer. These problems allow functionalities like public key encryption, key exchange, and digital signatures while maintaining quantum resistance. Another robust family is code-based cryptography, with classic Mechlies as a prime example. It derives its strength from the hardness of decoding certain linear error-correcting codes, a challenge that has resisted attacks for decades and appears equally formidable to quantum and classical computers alike. A vital reason for early preparation is that big transitions in cryptography require both time and caution. Organizations ranging from banks to government agencies rely on legacy systems built around RSA or ECC, embedding them into hardware, protocols, and software on a massive scale. Upgrading these infrastructures is not trivial, as it necessitates rewriting code, testing interoperability, auditing security, and ensuring regulatory compliance. If the quantum threat arrives sooner than expected, institutions unprepared to switch might be left scrambling to implement an unfamiliar standard. Meanwhile, an attacker could exploit the gap, decrypting sensitive information with newly available quantum resources. The concept of crypto-agility has thus gained traction, where systems are designed to be modular enough to swap out cryptographic primitives without complete overhauls. This approach facilitates a smoother pivot to PQC algorithms when the time comes. Some experts advocate adopting hybrid solutions in the near term, combining classical algorithms like RSA 2048 or ECC with a post-quantum algorithm, so that even if quantum breakthroughs materialize unexpectedly, the system's security does not collapse entirely. Google, Cloudflare, Microsoft, and other key players in the tech sphere have already conducted experiments or live trials to see how these new algorithms perform in real-world conditions. The findings suggest that while many PQC methods are more computationally heavy than existing techniques, with some optimizations, they can be integrated effectively. Performance overhead is one of the main challenges PQC must overcome, especially in constrained environments like embedded devices, the Internet of Things, or mobile networks where resources are limited. Lattice-based algorithms often require larger key sizes than RSA or ECC, though in certain contexts they can be more efficient in generating signatures or performing encryption. Code-based solutions like Mechlies might require especially large public keys, impacting their feasibility for some use cases. The cryptographic community is constantly refining these algorithms to reduce key sizes, optimize runtimes, and ensure that they stay resistant to advanced attacks. Researchers also keep a close eye on potential side-channel vulnerabilities, since quantum resistance is immaterial if an attacker can bypass the math by analyzing power usage or timing patterns. Another factor driving post-quantum efforts is the strategic positioning of countries that aim to gain an advantage in cyber warfare. Should any nation achieve quantum supremacy in factoring large numbers, it could snoop on classified communications and financial transactions of adversaries. The secrecy that shrouds such research programs raises concerns that a breakthrough might occur without public disclosure, giving the possessing country a window of opportunity to exploit the vulnerability. This uncertainty motivates defensive measures and encourages global cryptographic standards so that no single entity is left behind. An important distinction is that post-quantum cryptography and quantum cryptography are not the same. Quantum cryptography, as exemplified by quantum key distribution, QKD, relies on the principles of quantum mechanics to establish secure channels and detect eavesdroppers, While QKD can theoretically provide absolute security, it requires specialized hardware and infrastructure, which are not widely deployed. Post-quantum cryptography, in contrast, runs on classical hardware and can be rolled out across the Internet without the need for quantum communication lines. Because of this practicality, PQC is viewed as the near-term solution to the quantum threat, while quantum cryptography remains a parallel avenue that might eventually supplement or complement classical systems. The timeline for when quantum computers will truly endanger classical encryption is still debated. Some experts believe it may not happen until the 2030s or beyond, while others argue that even if large-scale quantum machines take 15 or 20 years to materialize, we must not wait. Once quantum computing is available, there will likely be no grace period. Any backlog of intercepted encrypted traffic could be quickly deciphered if it used outdated algorithms. Critical or long-lived data, such as medical records or state secrets, could be at particular risk, as these records might still be valuable decades into the future. For individuals, the shift to post-quantum standards may remain largely invisible, much like updates to TLS protocols or behind-the-scenes improvements to web encryption. But for enterprises, financial institutions, healthcare providers, and government agencies, the migration is more complex. They must catalog encryption dependencies across countless services, update or replace cryptographic libraries, and test extensively. Regulators around the world are already issuing guidance on quantum readiness. In the United States, an executive order now compels federal agencies to start planning post-quantum upgrades. Similar measures are happening within the European Union and other regions. PQC also intersects with privacy concerns since robust encryption is crucial to safeguarding individual rights. If quantum computers rendered encryption obsolete, hostile actors could rummage through private communications at will, undermining trust in digital platforms. Conversely, strong PQC solutions could help sustain anonymity tools, secure journalism, and protect whistleblowers. On a broader scale, successful adoption of post-quantum standards would reinforce the notion that encryption, as a dynamic field, can adapt to new threats. Cryptographers, in partnership with engineers and policymakers, must ensure that quantum security does not become a niche advantage, but rather a universal safeguard. Ultimately, the drive toward post-quantum cryptography exemplifies how technology evolves to meet emerging challenges. Just as the advent of classical computing spurred the initial wave of modern cryptographic methods, the coming quantum era prompts a reinvention of these techniques. By standardizing quantum-resistant algorithms, promoting research, and undertaking careful deployments, society can preserve confidentiality well into the future. An uncertain timeline for quantum decryption only amplifies the importance of proactive defense. Though the path ahead is complex, it remains far safer to begin transitioning now rather than wait for a cryptographic crisis that might arrive sooner than expected. Artificial intelligence and machine learning in cryptography. Artificial intelligence and machine learning have already transformed countless sectors, from supply chain optimization to medical diagnosis, and cryptography is no exception. As data volumes soar and threats become more complex, automated methods are increasingly vital for both constructing robust encryption and discovering its hidden weak spots. The prospect of AI-driven algorithms that can detect anomalies or hidden mathematical structures in ciphers is exciting for security experts who want to uncover vulnerabilities before malicious parties do. At the same time, criminals and state-sponsored hackers have begun leveraging machine learning in their pursuit of ways to compromise secure systems. This duality paints a vivid picture of an arms race in which AI emerges as a tool that can just as easily fortify our cryptographic walls as it can punch holes through them. On the defensive side, one of the major advantages AI brings is its ability to sift through massive data sets far faster than any human. In cryptography, Practitioners regularly grapple with tasks such as analyzing large codebases for potential flaws, validating random number generators, or scanning huge swaths of network traffic for suspicious patterns. Traditional methods may rely on rule-based checks or manual reviews, but a well-trained model can identify subtle correlations that might point to an exploitable bug. This approach is similar to how a spam filter flags unexpected patterns in an email, but applied to a domain where one inconspicuous oversight in code might break an entire encryption scheme. By rapidly detecting anomalies, AI effectively reduces the time window in which vulnerabilities remain undiscovered. This is especially critical given how quickly zero-day exploits can spread once they are put into circulation. One rapidly evolving field involves using machine learning to assess the strength of keys or the randomness of cryptographic functions. Secure encryption depends heavily on the principle that certain underlying processes, such as key generation, lack discernible patterns. Yet no system is perfect, and occasionally real-world implementations can introduce biases or design flaws. Machine learning can scrutinize these outputs, searching for faint indicators that reveal partial predictability. This technique transcends the limited heuristics that a human might apply, instead letting an algorithm run extensive statistical tests across billions of samples in search of a partial correlation. Finding one early might prompt a patch, sparing an organization from learning the hard way that an attacker has already discovered the shortcoming. AI also can strengthen cryptographic design by identifying novel approaches to encryption itself. Rather than relying on a small circle of cryptographers to come up with new algorithms, researchers have started experimenting with automated design frameworks that use evolutionary or reinforcement learning strategies. These systems generate a large number of encryption candidates, test them thoroughly under simulated attacks, including AI-driven attempts to break them, and discard those that prove too weak. Over many iterations, the result could be an algorithm so intricately constructed that even advanced adversaries, human or automated, struggle to crack it. Though it remains to be seen whether such a method will produce something truly revolutionary, it hints at the possibility that future encryption standards might bear the imprint of machine-driven creativity. Yet at the same time, adversaries are reaping benefits from AI in highly concerning ways. Brute forcing a password typically involves guessing combinations until something works. And though modern passwords can be quite complex, machine learning can dramatically reduce the guesswork. By training on leaked password databases that contain millions or even billions of entries, an AI model can learn common structures people pick, such as patterns involving birthdays, repeated digits, or combined dictionary words. Armed with this insight, it narrows the potential search space, jumping straight to highly probable guesses. Thus, a system like Hashcat or Pascan harnesses these learned patterns to significantly speed up brute force attempts. Even if the password is randomly generated, a well-honed model might still guess more efficiently than pure chance, further eroding older assumptions about password safety. Machine learning also shows potential in cryptanalysis of ciphers. Certain classical ciphers, especially if not implemented correctly, are susceptible to pattern analysis, but the real danger emerges in complex or lightweight algorithms used in embedded devices or in custom-designed protocols. These might have subtle correlations in their outputs under specific conditions that a conventional approach might overlook. An AI model can glean those correlations given enough training examples, effectively serving as an automated cryptanalyst. The same goes for side-channel attacks. A neural network can detect minute variations in timing or power consumption from hardware running encryption routines, enabling it to reconstruct keys from ephemeral signals that a person might write off as noise. This synergy between side-channel attacks and ML is particularly alarming, as small IoT devices with limited defenses could become prime targets. Balancing these threats is the promise that AI can help mitigate them. If defenders apply similar machine learning models, They might detect side-channel attacks earlier, or automatically adjust system parameters to obfuscate signals. For instance, a router or a hardware security module might run an adaptive ML-based shield that modifies timings or introduces noise whenever it perceives that an attacker is attempting to glean side-channel information. This concept aligns with the vision of self-healing networks, where each endpoint constantly collects telemetry, hunts for anomalies, and corrects them on the fly. Beyond the local domain of password cracking and side-channel analysis, we can examine the broader question. Could AI help break modern cryptographic standards like RSA or elliptic curve methods in the same manner that quantum computers threaten to do? Generally, the consensus is that these systems remain safe from classical machine learning attacks, because the time complexity advantage that quantum machines exploit arises from fundamental physics, superposition and entanglement, rather than pattern recognition. However, one cannot entirely dismiss the possibility that AI might discover new forms of number theory shortcuts or identify hidden vulnerabilities in the particular ways these algorithms are implemented. If a major breakthrough in that area does emerge, it's likely to come from an intersection of advanced mathematics and AI, not purely from pattern recognition. Nonetheless, the risk is there, and defenders cannot be complacent. Meanwhile, cryptographers are dabbling with the idea of designing algorithms that are AI hard, a playful term implying that not only should they be resistant to classical analysis and quantum-based factoring, but also to whatever heuristics a sufficiently advanced AI might apply. Though we do not have a rigorous understanding of what AI hard means, the concept underscores how advanced computing resources could become. In response, some researchers argue for post-quantum cryptography plus robust defenses at the implementation level, ensuring no single approach, be it quantum or AI-based, can trivially break encryption. Finally, a practical shift is occurring in how organizations adopt AI-based cybersecurity. Large corporations train AI models on vast sets of network logs, normal user behaviors, or typical encryption usage, seeking anomalies that might reflect an attempted breach or cryptographic manipulation. By automating the process of scanning for suspicious usage, these companies can identify intrusions or unusual attempts to manipulate keys. Law enforcement and intelligence agencies also use advanced AI to analyze captured data quickly, searching for connections or decrypting compromised systems. The question of ethics arises: if AI can break into a system that's protected, who ensures it isn't misused, especially when states are involved? To date, AI has not single-handedly reshaped cryptography to the same extent that quantum computing might, but it is already raising the stakes on both offense and defense. Passwords once thought secure might crumble under next-generation guesswork. Protocol flaws that would have remained hidden can be spotted in massive code audits. Real-time detection of potential infiltration, guided by machine learning classification, offers stronger defenses for well-prepared organizations. Meanwhile, criminals and foreign adversaries with sufficient resources can automate their cryptanalysis, side-channel hacking, or infiltration strategies at scale. Ultimately, whether AI acts as the hero or villain in cryptography will depend on how each side applies the technology. If defenders remain forward-looking, adopting machine learning for continuous monitoring, anomaly detection, and agile protocol development, they stand a good chance of keeping pace. But if complacency sets in and attackers consistently out-innovate defenders with cunning new uses of ML, the scales could tip the other way. History has shown that cryptography is never a static field. It evolves through cycles of invention, exploitation, and refinement. The arrival of AI-based cryptanalysis accelerates these cycles. By understanding the synergy between AI and encryption now, security experts can prepare for whatever breakthroughs or breakdowns lie ahead. The only certainty is that the interplay between cryptography and AI will intensify. With each new milestone, in AI capability, raising fresh concerns and prompting new defenses, ensuring that this high-stakes cat-and-mouse game continues well into the foreseeable future. DNA cryptography. DNA cryptography is a concept that intertwines biology and information security by encoding digital data into the same chemical structures that store genetic information. Instead of relying on zeros and ones, messages are translated into sequences of the 4 nucleobases, adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, and then physically stored in strands of synthetic DNA. At first glance, the idea seems almost futuristic, but ongoing advances in biotechnology hint that this approach could become more feasible in the coming years. Proponents hail DNA as a medium with extraordinary data density, durability, and potential resistance to conventional forms of hacking, especially because it defies many of the assumptions on which standard cryptanalysis rests. Although still an emerging field, DNA cryptography has already prompted experiments in fields such as espionage, long-term archival, and novel forms of authentication. One of the main appeals of DNA is its data density. A single gram of DNA can in principle hold an exabyte of data, dwarfing the capacity of any silicon-based medium. This advantage becomes even more striking when considering the longevity of DNA under proper conditions. Ancient DNA samples have been recovered from fossils tens of thousands of years old, and while modern synthetic samples would not necessarily endure so long in typical environments, specialized storage protocols could keep the material intact for centuries. As a result, institutions seeking ultra-long-term archives, such as national libraries and major tech companies, have started to explore how to reliably encode information into DNA, store it, and then retrieve it later by sequencing the molecules. Such usage does not necessarily involve intricate encryption, but it demonstrates the practicality of the fundamental idea that large volumes of data can be safely hidden in a minuscule biological format. DNA cryptography takes this one step further by incorporating techniques that disguise or scramble messages within these strands, requiring a specific decoding process that extends beyond simple sequencing. Proposals have included methods where a piece of text is converted into nucleobase sequences using a custom cipher, possibly in multiple steps. At times, random dummy strands are added, so only those who know which segments and markers to extract can reconstruct the actual payload. This approach can foil attempts at brute forcing, because a typical attacker might see nothing more than random genetic material. Even if they suspect that the molecules represent something more, they would face an enormous challenge trying to parse how the data was encoded, how it was segmented, and whether certain base pair patterns are purely noise. Standard cryptanalysis tools built for classical or quantum computers lose their edge when confronted with data that is physically stored in a form alien to conventional data structures. Yet the process of encoding digital content into DNA raises multiple technical and logistical hurdles. Synthesis of custom DNA sequences is far more expensive than generating a random string of bits. While costs have been declining, thanks to the biotech industry's efforts to develop cheaper synthesis platforms, it still requires specialized equipment, reagents, and expertise. The reading or decoding phase also involves a multi-step process of extracting the DNA, preparing it for sequencing, and interpreting the results. Sequencing costs have dropped precipitously over the years, but remain non-trivial, and errors can creep in if the molecules degrade or if sequencing coverage is insufficient. Although DNA can theoretically store data for centuries, it is vulnerable to heat, moisture, and certain biochemical processes. This means practical DNA cryptography solutions must invest in stable storage environments or encapsulation methods to protect the molecules from degradation. Another aspect that draws attention is the potential for stealth. DNA-coded messages can be hidden in everyday biological samples. A small portion of water or a seemingly innocuous test tube might contain an encoded message that looks no different from standard genetic material. If an adversary does not even suspect that information has been written into DNA, they may never attempt to sequence it. Historically, espionage has relied on microdots, invisible ink, and covert channels. DNA cryptography could represent the next generation of such tactics, allowing data to pass unnoticed through ordinary labs or personal items. For intelligence agencies, this might offer an advantage in secure communications or clandestine data transfers. However, it also raises the specter of advanced smuggling or data laundering, particularly if criminals or hostile entities adopt the technique. Critically, DNA cryptography relies on the complexity of biological molecules, rather than the large integer arithmetic that underpins standard encryption methods like RSA or elliptic curves. This might sidestep some threats from quantum computing, which can factor large numbers and tackle discrete logarithms with relative ease. While no system is unbreakable, a quantum computer that excels at factoring might not be as helpful when confronted with molecular codes that do not rest on the same mathematical structures. Still, the actual security of DNA cryptography depends on how thoroughly the encoding scheme hides the message. If the method is naive, a determined attacker can reconstruct the chain of transformations. Security experts point out that a robust encryption approach can be layered on top of DNA storage, combining the best aspects of conventional ciphers with the obfuscation of a biological substrate. Others caution that relying too heavily on obscurity, assuming that no one will suspect the presence of data in a DNA sample, may be risky if the practice becomes more widespread. Ethical concerns also surround DNA-based encryption. DNA is not just a random polymer. It can contain or mimic genetic information, making it tempting to embed messages in something that might be confused with real organisms or genuine genetic samples. Questions about consent and privacy arise if such processes were carried out without the knowledge of local authorities, or if unscrupulous actors tried to insert data-coded DNA into living organisms. There's also the challenge of attributing ownership. If a vial of DNA is discovered, does it belong to the person who has custody of it, or to someone else who originally created and encoded the molecules? The lines between biological property and digital data property could blur. In the realm of data storage, major tech companies have begun pilot projects to evaluate DNA as a future alternative to data centers. Although that direction focuses on stable and massive archives rather than clandestine cryptography, the methods are related. If one can store arbitrary information in a string of synthetic nucleotides, then they can also apply an encryption layer. Over time, a synergy might develop in which large-scale DNA-based archives incorporate cryptographic protocols to guarantee both integrity and confidentiality. Potentially, corporations and governments might keep highly sensitive archives in DNA form, relying on carefully designed retrieval protocols to ensure that no single entity can read or modify the data without authorization. For everyday users, DNA cryptography is nowhere near practical. People do not have the equipment or expertise to synthesize and sequence DNA messages at home, nor do they have a pressing need to hide data in such an esoteric manner. Cost remains high, speed is slow, and specialized lab processes are required at each step. Instead, DNA encryption is likely to remain within specialized or high-stakes domains, such as intelligence agencies needing the ultimate in covert messaging, research labs exploring proof-of-concept demonstrations, or archivists wanting a doomsday-proof medium. If costs plummet and miniaturized sequencing tools become ubiquitous, something that advanced biotech might eventually achieve, DNA cryptography might gain broader traction. The question is whether it will remain a niche curiosity or evolve into a mainstream method for certain sensitive tasks. As technology stands, DNA cryptography underscores how encryption is not solely the domain of prime factorization or polynomial time complexity, Biological complexity offers an entirely different plane on which to conceal information. Cells have used DNA to code life's blueprint for billions of years, demonstrating resilience and density unmatched by man-made media. In that sense, harnessing DNA for cryptographic storage is a natural, if radical, extension of the synergy between biology and computing. Of course, no approach is truly unbreakable. Effective DNA cryptography must adopt robust cryptographic transformations, combine them with well-implemented physical encoding, and ensure that no side channel or lab-based trick can glean the message. An attacker might, for instance, subject a suspect sample to thorough biochemical analysis, using advanced computational biology tools to see if any suspicious patterns stand out. The future cat-and-mouse game might migrate from code-breaking software to advanced lab techniques, scanning for hidden encodings. In the long run, many researchers envision that DNA cryptography, or more broadly molecular data storage, could protect civilizations' knowledge across centuries, functioning even if conventional digital archives degrade or become obsolete. The same techniques that protect ephemeral communications today could also ensure that the historical record remains authentic. The fundamental uniqueness of DNA-based data might act as a shield against certain digital threats, or it might prompt new forms of biological hacking. What remains clear is that as biotech continues to advance, the concept of using biology for encryption is likely to progress beyond novelty toward real utility. In combining the intricacies of cryptography with the robust, intricate architecture of genetic molecules, humanity may unlock a new frontier of secure messaging and data preservation that not only challenges our assumptions about code and storage, but also redefines what it means to keep information truly hidden in plain sight. The future of unbreakable encryption, in the ongoing struggle between those who want to keep information confidential and those aiming to uncover it. Encryption has served as a key defensive tool. From simple ciphers in antiquity to the sophisticated algorithms of today, each advance in cryptography has eventually faced new methods of attack. As quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and unexpected breakthroughs loom on the horizon, many wonder whether it might become feasible to achieve encryption that is truly unbreakable, or if in reality there will always be ways to undermine even the most advanced protective systems. Classical methods like RSA, ECC, and AES rest on mathematical assumptions that are extremely time-consuming for ordinary computers to solve. For practical purposes, such algorithms remain robust against brute force attempts, given present technology. But these systems could be upended by quantum computing. Shor's algorithm, designed specifically for a quantum machine, can factor large numbers in polynomial time, threatening to crack public key cryptography almost instantly. Similarly, Grover's algorithm can significantly reduce the search space for symmetric keys, weakening algorithms like AES unless key sizes are increased. Although fully scalable quantum computers may be years away, their potential is enough to drive researchers to develop post-quantum cryptography, intended to survive quantum-powered attacks. AI injects another level of complexity. Machine learning can scan vast troves of encrypted data or watch for subtle patterns in how systems operate, discovering flaws that might elude a human researcher. This can help defenders strengthen protocols, but also arm attackers with new automated cryptanalysis. Beyond pure mathematics, encryption systems must confront side-channel exploits in which power consumption, electromagnetic signals, or timing differences reveal secret keys. Even if quantum-resistant protocols become widespread, cunning adversaries can still focus on these hardware or implementation angles. At the same time, governments occasionally demand backdoors for law enforcement, introducing a separate vulnerability if such built-in keys fall into the wrong hands. Some see quantum cryptography itself as a potential route to absolute security, since quantum key distribution exploits physical principles to detect interception. But rolling out quantum networks globally is expensive and does not always address end-to-end vulnerabilities. Human error, operational lapses, and poor key management can spoil even the best theoretical protections. Others tout homomorphic encryption, which lets untrusted servers operate on data without ever decrypting it, or DNA cryptography, storing messages in molecules that are alien to most hacking methods. All these ideas promise greater resilience, yet rely on either untested premises, specialized hardware, or prohibitively high costs. Over time, though, the incremental improvement and drop in prices could make them far more accessible. Truly unbreakable encryption remains elusive because any system can fail at its weakest link. For instance, the complexity of a cryptographic function might be enormous, but an attacker could simply coerce an individual to reveal a password, or exploit a badly designed interface, or discover that a supply chain issue allowed the introduction of malicious chips. Moreover, as computing power grows and new algorithms come to light, the threshold of what's considered unbreakable changes. A cipher that seemed invulnerable in one decade might prove trivial to crack in the next. The race, therefore, is never really won. Cryptographers must continually adjust key lengths, refine algorithms, and ensure robust implementations to stay ahead of advancing techniques. Still, it is not essential that encryption be permanently unbreakable. The practical goal is to raise the bar high enough that any attack demands excessive time, money, or risk, effectively discouraging attempts or ensuring that data loses its value before it can be decrypted. In this sense, cryptography can be judged successful when it renders breaching efforts infeasible for the resources available. As a result, many protocols are designed with the lifespans in mind. Data that must remain confidential for just a few years can use different parameters than data requiring secrecy for decades or centuries. Looking forward, both public and private sectors are preparing new standards based on lattice problems or code-based cryptography, which researchers believe can withstand quantum assaults. Likewise, certain organizations are experimenting with quantum key distribution to gain near-immediate detection of any interception. Although these approaches may eventually become mainstream, they will not eliminate the potential for unexpected breakthroughs. The synergy of artificial intelligence, novel forms of hardware, and new cryptanalytic methods ensures that the offense versus defense cycle continues. In the end, perfect everlasting security is unlikely. Human factors, hardware vulnerabilities, and the natural evolution of computational methods mean that no single encryption scheme is guaranteed invulnerable forever. Still, encryption that is effectively unbreakable in practical terms, requiring unrealistic amounts of time and resources, remains achievable. As cryptographers innovate and attackers adapt, the best we can do is maintain a lead, staying vigilant against complacency while accepting that absolute security is a moving target rather than a fixed point.